300 years after the cataclysm, magic went out of control, the demon race descended, and a centuries-long war against humanity began. After that, the population plummeted, and everything fell into chaos. In the end, awakened individuals who possessed absurdly powerful magic created gigantic barriers. These barriers held back the demon invasion, allowing humanity to survive safely for a time. Humanity thus entered the era of universal awakening, in which every person awakens a profession upon reaching adulthood. The professions of the original 10 powerhouses became inherited professions. Each one can exist in only one person at a time, and they are the pillars of humanity. In Faiquan City, on the first day of April in the year 335 of the Cataclysm era, the profession awakening ceremony was about to begin. The protagonist had already arrived. The annual awakening test truly lived up to its reputation, as it was always crowded. When humans living within the barrier reached adulthood, they underwent an awakening test. Professions varied in type and rarity and were classified as N class, R class, S class, SR class, and UR class. The rarer the profession, the greater its combat power. Anyone who obtained a powerful profession could be admitted directly into an elite academy. The young people who came for the awakening prayed to the holders of the inherited professions, hoping to awaken something good. However, the protagonist was somewhat confused by all of that and asked one of the people what everyone was doing. The young man explained that there was a rumor that this year's test would reveal the holder of an inherited profession. There were currently 4 inherited professions without holders, so naturally they had been praying to be lucky enough to obtain one. The protagonist thought everyone's desire to rise in life was especially intense that year. That meant business was going to be extremely good for him. The test began, and several people were evaluated right away. The young man from earlier was impressed when he saw that Gay Fei had obtained 55 points of magical power, and he wished he could have something like that as well. The protagonist seized the opportunity and asked whether he would like a tomato that could give his magical power a boost. The young man was somewhat confused and asked how a tomato could possibly do that. The protagonist explained that he was a specialist in spiritual plants and that this was a premium variety he had personally cultivated with great care. Each tomato increased magical power by 5% for 5 minutes and cost only 5 gold coins. In addition, he also had satiety sweet potatoes that could keep someone full for an entire day, cucumbers that burned fat, and pumped up beans that increased attack power by 10%. Several people overheard him and were impressed, asking whether it was a scam since they had never heard of anything like that. Even so, hearing that the products could increase magical power and even help them lose some weight caught their interest. The protagonist took advantage of the situation and said that whoever arrived first could buy them because supplies were limited, and once they were gone, there would be no more. Moreover, he trusted his business so much that the first customer could try one for free. The young man standing before him was still somewhat suspicious, but decided to give it a try. He soon realized that his magical power truly was increasing, and his body felt slightly lighter. Another young man nearby was surprised because he had heard that those spiritual vegetables were developed by the agricultural department of the Extraordinary Academy. He had also heard that they were supplied exclusively to SR class students or higher, but the protagonist explained that this was a special promotion for the testing convention, and that everyone there had the potential to become an academy student. Without wasting any time, the man asked the protagonist to wrap up all of them for him, but that caused a huge commotion. The others who were also interested in buying began questioning why that man should be allowed to take everything. The protagonist merely had the farmer profession, but for some reason, when he reached the maximum level, all the vegetables and fruits he planted began granting excellent buffs. Even though he had used a few marketing tactics, the effects of his products were completely genuine. Sometime later, while he was sitting in front of a certain shop, another boy approached, selling fertilizer, seeds, and other supplies. Lin Feng decided to buy a few things, but unfortunately, he did not have enough money left to purchase premium fertilizer and improve the fields. The seller thanked the protagonist because his spiritual plants helped many people and asked why he did not grow more of them. Lin Feng asked whether he truly thought cultivating plants with such powerful effects was easy. The young man thought it was a great waste because the protagonist had been talented since childhood, but had ended up becoming nothing more than a... Lin Feng said it was fine and told the young man to hurry home because Aunt Zhou was waiting for him. But that truly was his story. He had been called a genius since childhood, yet he had awakened only the N-class farmer profession. When he went to burn offerings for his late father, the archdruid, he was afraid his father might leap out of his coffin from sheer embarrassment. Perhaps it was the balance of fate. A skilled mother and an extremely powerful father had produced a simple farmer. In the end, however, he was quite satisfied with his current peaceful life. He did not need to go to the battlefield and die like his father, nor did he have to make his mother worry so much about him. Even if it was only for his mother's sake, He needed to take proper care of the family farm. Suddenly, a drop of something landed on his nose and the protagonist looked up, trying to understand what was happening because the sky was completely clear. At that moment, however, a man appeared out of nowhere and fell from the sky. The protagonist was somewhat frightened, thinking that the barrier might have broken, and demons had invaded the area. The man stood up in alarm and said that the holder of the inherited profession, the necromancer He Xiao, had betrayed all of humanity. He was trying to pass his inheritance on to the demon race, so someone needed to be warned as quickly as possible. At that exact moment, however, a gigantic hand appeared behind him. The protagonist became even more frightened as he tried to understand what was truly happening. Passing an inherited profession onto the demon race? That should not even have been possible. A somewhat strange humanoid being said that he had seen everything and called the man an idiot. Instead of running away, he had walked straight toward his death. If he had not been injured by forbidden magic, he would have already left the city. Once he passed his profession onto the demon race, he would obtain an immortal body, but he had been trapped in the academy for too long, and they had probably already noticed. He Xiao looked to the side and saw the protagonist trying to leave unnoticed, but he grabbed the boy by the shirt and asked who had said he could leave. The man who had just been killed was the famous Dean Yue Ye of the Extraordinary Academy, and he had died in such a miserable manner. Why not use his blood and bones as an offering to celebrate? Lin Feng struggled in every possible way but realized that the man's magical power was bizarre and that he could not escape at all. Nevertheless, he tried not to lose his composure and thought of something he could use to free himself from that man. With his farm tool mastery at the maximum level and its derived skill, Summon Farm Tools, he created a tool and struck He Xiao's arm, saying that if an offering or something like that was not performed by the person themselves, it would send them straight to the 18th level of hell. He Xiao was stunned because that should have been impossible. How had that boy, who was clearly nothing more than a farmer, managed to injure him and break free? Lin Feng seized the opportunity, picked up the magical weapon lying beside him that the man had dropped, and fired directly at He Xiao, sending him flying backward. He Xiao realized that the Matrix Dancer's marking formation had appeared, and in that case, he only needed to possess the boy's body. That was right. Without wasting any time, he quickly lunged forward and entered Lin Feng's body, causing him tremendous discomfort. He Xiao was impressed because even though the protagonist had an extremely low-ranking profession, his talent was quite decent. Therefore, he could consider himself very fortunate to become He Xiao's vessel. The protagonist asked whether that was truly going to happen because he had not trained since childhood without taking a single day off just to have his body stolen by someone else. Therefore, that man would have to work a little harder if he wanted to succeed. He Xiao explained that it did not matter because an inferior would always remain inferior, and the difference between his power and the protagonist's was unimaginable, as he stood at a level Lin Feng would never be able to reach. Lin Feng sat down on the ground thinking that it seemed luck was not on his side this time. However, his body belonged to him alone, and would never be used for something like that, so they could go to hell together. He Xiao told him to wait and asked what he was planning to do. Lin Feng did not hesitate for even a second, and did what had to be done because even if they died together, he would never allow such a despicable being to control his body. He apologized to his father because he had not wanted to join him so soon and receive a scolding. But unfortunately, he had been forced to make that decision, as he could not allow a traitor to the human race to use his body for such a purpose. Lin Feng loses consciousness for a moment, but something unexpected begins to happen. He Xiao asks what that strange light is, and apparently the boy's magical power is beginning to erupt. The magical power becomes so strong that even He Xiao is frightened. He knows very well that it is the Radiant, but he cannot believe that something like this is actually possible and is happening right before his eyes. The Radiant envelops the Necromancer's entire body and simply absorbs him completely. A message appears congratulating the protagonist. It is a system notification informing him that he has acquired a new talent, the inherited profession, Necromancer. Lin Feng opens his eyes and is surprised to see that he is still alive. On top of that, he can control his body perfectly, which means that man failed to possess him. To better understand what is happening, he decides to open his status screen and sees that his profession is now Unique Mutant Spiritual Farmer Master, Level 1. His strength, constitution, and luck are at 300. His agility and spirit are at 100, and his magical power is only 10. His skills have also changed considerably. He now possesses rapid land clearing, along with undead affinity, efficient planting, basic transcendent growth, rapid harvesting, basic undead summoning, harvest enhancement, passive soul extraction, and farm tool mastery, which is at the maximum level. In addition, his level has returned to 1, but all of his farmer attributes that had been maxed out were preserved. His magical power has also increased, and perhaps that happened because of the soul power of that traitorous piece of trash. This means that when he levels up again, his attributes may be able to surpass their limits. On top of that, he has a new skill, undead summoning. This makes him wonder whether he can really summon undead, though he hopes it will not be that man. In his right hand, he can create the power of a farmer, while in his left hand, he can create the power of a necromancer. When he brings the two together, he realizes that the magical powers are merging. His profession tree has also branched out. This is not a class change. He has gained an additional profession. This makes him realize that he is now the necromancer, and apparently the man who had entered his body really was the awakened holder of that legendary inherited profession. He is extremely confused by all these new developments. But even so, he can sense that this power does not fully belong to him yet. Therefore, if he cannot tame it and completely turn it into his own power, not only will his farmer profession be ruined and disappear, but his consciousness will also be devoured by that man again. Although he does not like that color very much, it still looks extremely powerful. He activates his undead summoning skill and manages to summon the specter Yue Ye at level 1, and the wild hunter Hei Xiao, also at level 1. The protagonist is surprised to see what they truly are, and even though their levels have been reset, all their skills remain intact, meaning they can level up again. The inspection team is approaching, and he needs to get out of there as quickly as possible until he understands more about what is truly happening. After all, no one would believe that an ordinary farmer killed two extraordinary men. But if anyone discovers his current situation, it could spell his own end. Therefore, his priority now is to find a place that offers protection, resources, and high-level land, somewhere he can test his control over this new, dangerous power and turn his father's theories into reality. One day later at his farm, he thinks that an entire day has already passed, yet the necromancer's influence over his profession still has not disappeared. A headline on the financial channel is announcing that it is Veteran Agricultural Teacher Day, but the protagonist could not care less about that. The only thing he wants to understand is his new power, because the crops he has catalyzed are all becoming somewhat strange. When he uses a little more of his power, the plant begins growing in a different way, and as soon as a bird approaches, it opens its mouth and pulls the bird inside. Lin Feng is frightened because if the public sees something like that, they may think it is some kind of demon invasion, so he needs to get rid of it as quickly as possible. However, while burying his strange creation, he thinks that his new magical power has caused a bizarre mutation in his crops. Still, if he can control that power and guide it while cultivating plants, perhaps he can create those special varieties his father envisioned but was never able to grow. Those valuable crops that can upgrade professions. Sometime later, while watching television, the broadcast is interrupted by breaking news. The commentator says that they are searching for the holder of the inherited necromancer profession, a man named Hei Xiao, because he launched a rebellion the previous day and killed Dean Yue Ye. His crimes are therefore heinous, and anyone who provides clues will be generously rewarded. Anyone who helps him will be treated as an accomplice and receive the same punishment. The protagonist had already expected all of this, and now that his concern has become reality, he absolutely cannot allow anyone to learn about his necromancer power. However, he now needs to think of names for his undead servants so that they can pass inspection, otherwise it could cause problems. While thinking about it, he gets a great idea and decides that perhaps he can simply call them farm assistants because his status panel says Spiritual Farmer Master. As the master of a farm, it is perfectly normal to have a few assistants, so it should not be a major problem. He continues watching television, and the program announces that in order to deal with the pressure from the demons, the Extraordinary Academy is opening additional enrollment slots. Everyone who passes the evaluation will receive Academy resources and the right to private property where they can cultivate high-level crops, in addition to special subsidies. Enrolled students can also hire farmers to cultivate high-regeneration crops for them. Lin Feng thinks that the Academy's land is safe, fertile, and backed by abundant resources. It is exactly what he needs most right now, so he must get in. His identity as a necromancer is a ticking time bomb. To everyone else, Spiritual Farmer Master is nothing more than an ordinary farmer. Sometime later at the Academy Square for registration, he is undergoing his interview. The interviewer asks him to state his name, age, awakened profession, and level. Lin Feng introduces himself, giving his name and explaining that he is currently 18 years old and possesses the Level 1 Spiritual Farmer Master profession. The interviewer is surprised by the name of that profession because he has never heard of a Spiritual Farmer Master. On top of that, it is yet another non-combat class trying to force its way into the academy. He asks the protagonist to display a little of his profession's aura. However, the examiner does not like it at all and says that it is nothing more than the useless aura of a farmer, so there is no need for him to keep wasting his own time or everyone else's. Because of that comment, several other people begin mocking the situation, saying that the protagonist probably invented the name Spiritual Farmer Master himself. Lin Feng gets angry because of this and tells his instructor that his profession is a mutant profession, so he hopes he can at least be given a chance since his foundation is extremely solid. However, the instructor continues mocking him and shouts, asking what kind of solid foundation a level 1 piece of trash could possibly have before ordering security to throw the brat out. Lin Feng shows him the notice they issued, pointing out that the recruitment announcement states that professionals of every profession are allowed to take the test, so an instructor should be very careful about what he says and does if he does not want to be reported. He takes out his phone and pretends to call the disciplinary office, saying that there is a teacher there refusing to allow him to take the academy test. The instructor snatches the phone from the protagonist's hand and shouts, asking whether he really has the nerve to report him. He says Lin Feng can believe whatever he wants, but he will regret it because there is no way a level 1 farmer like him can pass the test. The other prospective students who are also there to take the test think the instructor's behavior is going too far because rejecting a farmer is one thing, but acting that way is completely different. On top of that, there is a rumor going around that his promotion had fallen through, which was why he had been forced to work in admissions. The instructor hears the comment and shouts that anyone who does not want to take the test can leave immediately. Sometime later, the instructor shows him the way, and as soon as they arrive at the Chunin exam, those who know. The instructor warns the protagonist that he can still give up if he wants. Lin Feng simply ignores his instructor and thanks him for showing the way, saying that he can continue on his own from there. As soon as he ventures deeper into the forest, he thinks that it is now time to let those little horned rabbits experience the terror of industrialized agriculture. That bag of carrot essence powder is his newest creation and can easily attract even aggressive level 20 rabbits. Compared with those lower level rabbits, this will be extremely easy. As soon as a small rabbit appears, He Xiao eliminates it almost instantly. However, the protagonist thinks that waiting around for rabbits is far too slow, so he gives an order to his two servants. They must make sure that no one sees them, but they also need to eliminate every horned rabbit that appears nearby. The two servants quickly charge through the forest, destroying everything in their path and killing every rabbit that appears. Lin Feng is impressed to see that both of them are extremely powerful even as level 1 undead, and apparently he got very lucky. A short while later, an instructor announces that time is up and asks all the candidates to come out and hand over the rabbit horns they managed to collect. Several people approach, turning in between 1 and 3 horns. The instructor becomes furious, saying that all of them have failed and orders the trash to get out of there immediately. However, the young people explain that there are plenty of rabbits around, but for some reason they are extremely difficult to find. Finally, it is the protagonist's turn. The instructor continues mocking him and tells the trash to hand over whatever he managed to get, although he already assumes that Lin Feng probably did not obtain a single one. Lin Feng summons all the rabbits he managed to collect, dumping them on top of the instructor, and says that there are a total of 500 rabbit horns there. And if the instructor wants, he can count them one by one. The instructor is so shocked that he cannot believe this could have happened naturally and accuses the protagonist of cheating. Suddenly, however, another man enters the room and orders the instructor to stop immediately, saying that even at his age, he is still bullying a mere boy. The instructor realizes that the director is standing right beside him and becomes surprised, asking what he is doing there. The director explains that if he had not come, his pet rabbits would have been driven to extinction by certain people with no professional ethics. He takes responsibility for the situation and announces that the protagonist has passed the preliminary test. Lin Feng sincerely thanks the director for giving him justice, but the director takes a closer look at him and says that the boy looks very familiar. Lin Feng becomes slightly nervous at that statement, wondering if he has been discovered. The director asks the protagonist what his relationship is with Professor Lin Xie. Lin Feng breathes a sigh of relief because apparently the director has not discovered the abilities of his hidden profession. He explains that Lin Xiaoye is his father and asks how the director knows him. The director is amazed to learn that this young man is the son of his old friend and apparently is planning to enroll at the academy. Out of gratitude toward his old friend, he asks whether the protagonist is having any difficulties because his uncle can pull a few strings for him. The woman beside him reminds the director that everyone is watching. He quickly changes the subject and tells his new nephew that his uncle has a few matters to handle first, but once Lin Feng enrolls, his uncle will personally show him around the entire academy. As soon as the director leaves, the protagonist thinks that he does not know exactly why, but he somehow feels that the man is not very reliable. The woman from earlier asks all the students who passed the preliminary test to follow her. Those who failed do not need to be discouraged because they will have other opportunities next time. Meanwhile, at the Extraordinary Academy, inside the investigation room of the Sunwheel branch, a man is staring at a board filled with notes and realizes that Dean Yue Ye and He Xiao disappeared at the same time. Dean Yue Ye probably discovered He Xiao's secret and, when he went to investigate, was discovered himself, leading to his death. However, the man knows that both of them died at the same time, and there was probably someone behind everything who took He Xiao's inherited talent. He concludes that this is most likely what happened, and now all they need to do is find whoever obtained the necromancer talent in order to uncover the entire truth. Another man tells Tuka to stop with those crazy theories. They already know that he is desperate to prove himself, but this is not helping. Tuka realizes that they do not believe his words at all, but regardless, he will find the evidence and prove that he is right. A woman thinks that perhaps they should try to stop that man because he is one of the Duke's men. However, the other man thinks that he should have left long ago because the Sunwheel Academy trains the elite and is not a place for freeloaders to put on a show. At that moment, the director appears and says that orders have come from above. As soon as they find He Xiao, they are to eliminate him without asking any questions. The other two ask what they should do if he is already dead. The director believes that perhaps he has already changed his appearance and says that anyone who uses necromancer abilities can be eliminated without hesitation. Back at the Extraordinary Academy, inside the mission hall, the teacher explains that all freshmen must clear the special Level 5 dungeon, the Horned Beast Lair, located outside the city within a time limit of 3 hours. The students become worried because they do not know how they are supposed to accomplish that when they are not even Level 4, and only a few people have managed to reach Level 5 at most. Killing the boss might be achievable, but with a 3-hour time limit, it becomes basically impossible. The teacher explains that obviously they do not expect the students to do it alone. They are allowed to form teams, but each group can have no more than 5 people. Once they have assembled their team, they can register with her to start the timer. While everyone excitedly forms their teams, the protagonist remains standing there, simply analyzing his stats and abilities. A girl approaches him with a charming smile and introduces herself, saying that she is a Level 7 magic class professional. She also saw his initial test, and eliminating so many horned rabbits like that means he must be very powerful. For that reason, she would like to form a team with him. Lin Feng thinks that at Level 7, she could certainly clear that dungeon by herself, and if he were merely a farmer, he would accept her invitation immediately. However, he cannot expose his necromancer side under any circumstances. He tries to reject her gently, apologizing but saying that he would rather do it alone. The girl seems very understanding and simply wishes him good luck. Lin Feng walks over to the teacher and says that he would prefer to complete the mission alone, but she is somewhat surprised and warns him that the difficulty is not that low. The protagonist simply ignores the warning and asks her to give him the mission scroll. With no other choice, she hands him the scroll and asks whether he really intends to go alone and whether he might be after the solo clear reward, the black bear gallbladder, since that prize is extremely useful for someone at a low level like him. However, he needs to consider the risks and determine whether he can truly handle everything. Lin Feng merely smiles at her and thanks her for the warning. A short while later, he reaches the entrance to the dungeon, and the guards standing outside ask where the rest of his party is. Lin Feng explains that he is going in alone, but the guards warn him that this is a Level 5 dungeon and that entering alone is far too dangerous, so he should come back after finding other people. However, the protagonist shows them the scroll and points out that the rules allow solo entry, so he does not need anyone else. The guards realize that he is probably after the black bear gallbladder, the bonus reward for clearing the dungeon alone, but one of them thinks that although he is certainly courageous, he should consider whether he actually has the ability to complete it. Unable to stop him, they simply wish him good luck, and the protagonist enters the dungeon. As soon as he enters, 2 monsters appear, but since they are only Level 3 or Level 4, they no longer pose any threat to him because he has already reached Level 6. He easily destroys most of the monsters around him, and even though the guide had warned that there were many monsters inside, the sheer number is still excessive. However, this is perfect for testing his new summoning method. He activates undead summoning, and the monsters he killed are resurrected as his new servants. He orders his entire new army to attack, except for his first 2 servants. He notices that the monster type undead retains some characteristics from when they were alive. They are extremely aggressive but very stupid, and can only follow simple commands. On top of that, they consume less mana to create. However, the protagonist wonders whether they are useful only for fighting, or whether they can also perform other tasks such as fetching water. He lets his other 2 servants attack, and the strength of both is truly impressive. They begin destroying everything in front of them with incredible ease. The difference between human undead and monster undead is enormous, because humans are more intelligent and can use the abilities they had while alive, allowing them to fight much more effectively. In the future, he can leave tasks such as weeding and fertilizing to them. The protagonist continues destroying every monster in his path, and because of this, he manages to reach level 7. Half an hour later, he has already reached the door leading to the dungeon boss. A chained bear appears before him with a terrifying aura, but the protagonist has been looking forward to this moment because the boss is perfect for testing the full extent of his power. He calls for his army to appear. He Xiao needs to take the front line while Yue Ye is responsible for casting curses, and the rest must attack the monster's joints and eyes. The army begins its assault. Meanwhile, the protagonist is eating some fruit, thinking that his coordination is becoming increasingly professional. The fruit is helping him regenerate his magical power. With relative ease, he manages to eliminate the boss and reaches level 8, obtaining several rewards. However, when he picks up one of the rewards, he realizes that it only gives a bonus of 10 constitution points, which means it is basically useless since it is far less than what his crops provide. The system begins calculating the dungeon rewards while also confirming his current professions. He possesses both the farmer and necromancer professions, and the corresponding rewards will be obtained. After the dungeon closes, he receives 2 sets of rewards, and thinks that perhaps this is because he has 2 professions. This dungeon is giving him double rewards, so perhaps the plants he cultivates may also have room for something similar. As soon as he leaves the dungeon, everyone is shocked, asking whether he really cleared it alone because that is impossible. Everyone knows what the dungeon is like inside, so he probably only went in to fool around and never even reached the end. However, he simply keeps walking and returns to his instructor to turn in the mission. As soon as she checks it, she realizes that he really did complete it and he even did it alone. She says that she will submit the mission scroll to the administration office, but stresses that going alone was extremely risky. If a new student dies in a dungeon shortly after starting classes, it causes a major problem. Lin Feng thanks her once again for the warning and says that he understands. She continues by saying that the final interview will take place in the academy's main hall and that he can go rest first. As soon as he leaves, several people stare at him strangely. The instructor thinks that perhaps this can serve as a lesson because being that reckless does not work very well at that academy. While walking through the forest, he notices that several people are following him. The protagonist prepares himself to act while the others begin questioning whether it is really worth it, because if he truly managed to defeat that dungeon alone, it means he is extremely strong. However, one of them tells the group to relax a little because he is still below level 10, and there is a limit to how much he can endure. On top of that, he just came out of the dungeon, which consumes a great deal of energy, and he has not rested for even a single minute. The group decides to act and tells the farmer to stop immediately. The protagonist asks whether they are talking to him, and the 3 introduce themselves before asking whether one person should really keep so many rewards. He must have been extremely lucky inside the dungeon, so he needs to hand over the bear gallbladder and the skill scroll immediately. Otherwise, they will show him what a real battle is like. Lin Feng says that there are dozens of candidates, so why did they choose him specifically? The group asks whether he really has no idea or is simply pretending to be stupid. Solo clear rewards such as the bear gallbladder, which increases endurance tenfold, are elite items. Something like that is not meant for a farmer like him. However, the protagonist thinks that increasing endurance tenfold is nothing special because a watermelon he grows can already do that. He takes out the bear gallbladder and asks whether that is what they were talking about. One of the men says yes and tries to grab it, but a huge explosion erupts between them. The girl from earlier steps in front of the protagonist and asks what they are trying to do because fighting is forbidden at the academy, so they are probably asking to be expelled. One of the men tells Ailing not to interfere where she was not invited. Even though the situation has nothing to do with her, she still dislikes what they are doing, so now it has become her business as well. Although she does not want a direct fight, she prepares to attack and says that they need to leave immediately, otherwise she will tell the instructor and they will be punished. However, the man says that she will only be able to tell the instructor if she gets the chance, and if she insists on protecting that farmer, they can deal with both of them at the same time. The 3 prepare to attack. Lin Feng knows that the girl is level 7, so she is probably strong enough to handle those guys alone. Ailing becomes angry when she sees that they are playing dirty and asks whether the protagonist would like to join in, but he simply starts running and tosses the black bear gallbladder to her, thanking her for her kind heart and giving it to her as a reward. Ailing explains that she did not help him because of that, but because he was being treated unfairly. However, the protagonist could not fight because no one could be allowed to see his powers. A short while later, inside his temporary private room, He realizes that the dungeon skill scroll is not suitable for him. However, he does not know why. Even so, Lin Feng tries something, and as soon as he does, the system announces that he has learned a new skill called Special Cultivation. Special Cultivation is currently at beginner level, and he can use magical power and special materials to strengthen undead summons, allowing him to increase their level, improve their quality, or teach them new skills. His plan worked because he needed to use the magic of both professions at the same time to activate that skill. He summons his undead to test his new ability. Hei Xiao, who was level 6, manages to rise to level 8. The same happens to Yue Ye, who goes from level 6 to level 8. The magical horned bear he defeated, which was level 7, rises to level 9. The lizard and the magical horned eagle rise from level 5 and level 6 to level 7. He's very satisfied with the progress, but the only downside is that he does not know when he will gain access to new land because he does not want to risk his own fields while testing his new crops. As soon as he leaves his apartment, Ailing tries to return the magical bear gallbladder to him, but the protagonist tells her that he gave it to her. Ailing says that he cannot do that with such a valuable item, but the protagonist quietly says that he does not understand why they treat such a poor material as if it were a treasure. Ailing is surprised and asks whether she heard him correctly when he called the item bad, but what he really wants to do is go deep into the forest because there probably will not be anyone there. He has no idea what his new ability does to plants, but when he uses it, he notices that they look exactly the same as before. However, when he notices those things moving, he becomes slightly surprised because they resemble monsters. Tuka is running like a madman through the forest because the readings from the spirit detectors are becoming stronger and stronger. And apparently, he was right because there is a great deal of necromancer energy around. He passes by the protagonist and tells him to wait because, judging by his clothes, he is just a farmer. Lin Feng asks what a farmer did to bother him so much, but Tuka simply continues what he was doing and asks the protagonist whether he saw any suspicious person appearing nearby. Lin Feng stops to think for a moment and says that, now that he mentions it, he actually did see a suspicious person around there. Tuka becomes excited and asks where it happened, but the protagonist points at him and says that the suspicious person is standing right in front of him. Tuka becomes furious and asks whether the protagonist is trying to make a fool of him because he is one of the elites of Sunwheel Academy and the nephew of the Iron Lion Duke. So how dare a mere worthless farmer be rude to the nephew of a duke? For that reason, he must die. Tuka unleashes all of his power, transforming into a lion, and says that he will make that useless farmer pay for his words and foolish actions. However, the protagonist says that the farmer he despises so much can defeat him with just one hand. Tuka charges forward and tells him to prove it. The protagonist does not know exactly why, but the aconite from his field developed a paralyzing effect after being corroded by undead magic. The last time he tested it, he was left completely immobilized and bedridden for an entire day. Grinding that thing into powder works wonderfully as a narcotic. He throws the powder into Tuka's face, leaving him dizzy and completely without strength. Tuka asks what the protagonist did and why his strength suddenly disappeared. Lin Feng explains that it is merely some ordinary aconite powder from the fields, and that this is the kind of power farmers possess. With a single punch, he manages to knock his opponent unconscious and ties him to a tree. The protagonist thinks that this man cannot even handle a simple farmer, and yet still wants to call himself an elite. Now he can use that time to cool his head, and when someone eventually finds him, he can consider it a lesson learned. A short while later, an announcement is issued to the candidates. They need to gather in the auditorium for their interviews with the instructors. Lin Feng needs to return immediately because the interviews are about to begin. Outside the auditorium of the Extraordinary Academy, several people are already gathered and talking. However, as soon as he approaches, people comment that he is the person who cleared the level 5 dungeon alone because they heard that all he knows how to do is run away and take advantage of women. Compared with Shi Yan and Bogu, he is far worse. He may be strong compared with ordinary candidates, but the young man speaking is part of the level 5 elite and has the advantage. Ailing tries once again to return the bear gallbladder, but the protagonist asks her to accept it since it is useless to him. With every bite he takes of his watermelon, he gains a temporary increase of more than 2 points in endurance. He thinks that he simply cannot understand why those people treat that kind of thing as if it were a treasure. Inside the auditorium at the instructor's interview area, the director explains that during the interview, the instructors choose the students. But the students also choose their instructors. Students and instructors bring out the best in each other, and now he will call the students by name to come to the front. The first is Shi Yan. He introduces himself, giving his name and saying that he is a level 6 Earth-type warrior. His current ability is summoning battle armor. One of the instructors becomes interested and says that it is not bad at all. Since he is a level 44 Earth-type barbarian, they could take this opportunity to become instructor and student. Shi Yan becomes excited, thinking that it would be a great honor. After several students, the protagonist is called. He releases a little of his power, gives his name, and says that he is a level 8 spiritual farmer master. His instructor is impressed to see that reaching level 8 at his age is very good, but another instructor asks everyone to take a proper look because that boy is merely a simple farmer. The other instructors also comment that the academy trains talented people to go to the front lines of the war, not ordinary people to become nothing more than cannon fodder in a battle zone. However, the level 44 barbarian disagrees, because the protagonist performed very well in both the preliminary test and the second test. The director concludes that their opinions differ, so they can conduct a combat ability assessment for the boy. The other instructors agree without hesitation. The director asks the protagonist whether he is willing, since their ultimate objective is to fight demons in a war zone, so if he cannot fight, there is no point in even trying. Lin Feng thinks that a combat test could be both very good and very bad at the same time, because his current combat strength is not that high and he wants to fight without exposing his necromancer abilities, but he accepts the challenge. The level 44 barbarian says that the test is very simple. The protagonist only needs to withstand several minutes of his attacks, and that will prove that he has talent for combat. As soon as he releases his aura, all the students around them fall to their knees under the pressure of someone above level 40 because they can barely breathe. However, the protagonist remains standing. One instructor is impressed, seeing that his endurance alone has already earned him a little more respect, but now it is time to see what he is truly capable of. The instructor tells the protagonist to use all his power and attack him. Lin Feng knows very well that the pressure of a level 44 opponent is extremely intense, but even so, he can endure it for now. He calls for his servants to appear. His strategy had worked because by wrapping the undead in nature magic, he's able to hide the dark aura they emit. No one can imagine that the bear with a cabbage-like face is actually an undead summon. The instructor is impressed, realizing that it is a rare mutant profession with extremely dense nature magic, but that only makes things more interesting. The two begin fighting, but the instructor gains the advantage and attacks several times. Even so, the summon remains standing. The director is impressed by the loyalty of that summon because any normal summon that had been injured that badly would have disappeared long ago. The bear lets out a loud roar and charges forward, counterattacking. The director notices that old Ji seems to be getting slightly out of breath during the battle, but the protagonist had already expected that because his summons are undead, so they feel no pain and never complain. And any superficial damage can be repaired with a little magic. The instructor thinks that he had wanted to show off a little in front of the students, but apparently Lin Feng truly has talent, so he will have to take the fight a little more seriously. He tells the protagonist that he will find a way to compensate him for his destroyed summon, but now he needs to pay close attention. In that world, ordinary summoner-type professions need to pay a price to sign contracts with their summons. If the summon is destroyed, it dies and the contract ends, which is why the instructor had said that. He uses his barbarian skill, Bloodthirst, to attack the bear, which is instantly torn apart. Confident, he laughs in the protagonist's face, saying that having his summon destroyed must hurt a lot, so he can cry if he wants because he prefers students who are straightforward and show what they feel. Lin Feng remains calm and completely expressionless. The instructor is slightly surprised and asks why he does not seem sad at all about what just happened, wondering if perhaps he is so devastated that he cannot even react. Lin Feng begins releasing more of his summons and restrains the barbarian's body. The instructor becomes irritated and says that Lin Feng is starting to fight dirty because he never mentioned that he had more summons. The battle between the two becomes increasingly intense. The director realizes that things are getting somewhat out of control, intervenes in the fight, and orders both of them to stop immediately. He emphasizes that the protagonist has already proven his worth and is qualified to become a student of the Extraordinary Academy. However, all the nature-type instructors are currently rotating at the border, so there is no one available to teach him for the time being. Lin Feng is more interested in his cultivation resources. The director emphasizes that the academy will never shortchange anyone on resources, so he will receive everything according to the standard. In addition, since he was an outstanding student in that examination, he can make one request of the academy. Lin Feng thinks that he has gained freedom, but the resources in that place are truly heaven for him. Lin Feng says that he would like a piece of land. The director is somewhat surprised by that request and asks whether he really does not want rare resources, high-level equipment, or elite items, but only land. The protagonist explains that his profession is spiritual farmer master, and how can he be a master farmer without land to cultivate? The director eventually agrees and explains that there is an unused training wasteland on the western side of the city that has been vacant for some time, so the protagonist can do whatever he wants with that place. However, if he has any other requests, he can come speak to him directly. After settling everything, the director tells him to go rest for a while and continues the examination with the other students. In the investigation director's office, he's looking at the protagonist's file because spiritual farmer master is quite an interesting profession. The instructor comes to him and says that she has an urgent report. She explains that Tuka, from the investigation team that had been tracking He Xiao, has been confirmed dead and was brutally killed by a necromancer. The body is not far from the auditorium, so they suspect that a necromancer has infiltrated the academy. At the training wasteland in the western zone that the protagonist had received, he finally finds the place. The right to use 100 mu of training land in western Feichuan City, belonging to the Extraordinary Academy, is now in effect. The temporary lease contract has been activated for 1 year and the repulsion barrier is open, with exclusive access granted to student Lin Feng. He thinks that 1 year is far too short. However, most people go to the front lines after 1 year, so it makes some sense. Now he has all that land to himself for an entire year. He brings out his summons because now it is time to get to work. All of them begin working, preparing the soil, bringing water, and even arranging the fields. Meanwhile, the protagonist simply enjoys a beautiful sunset while eating his watermelon. Magic truly does change people's lives, and the ancients were not lying about that. A short while later, Yue Ye taps his master on the shoulder, and Lin Feng sees that the land has already been prepared. He's impressed to realize that the two are more proactive than he had imagined. Yue Ye gives a faint smile, and the protagonist stares at him to see whether he really noticed it, but then takes a deep breath because expecting undead to have self-awareness is already asking too much. As soon as Lin Feng walks away, Yue Ye smiles again, as if he understood everything. Lin Feng looks at the greenhouses his small army built and at the results of his crops. He's pleased because everyone else only becomes stronger through exhausting and intense training, while he becomes stronger through farming in a balanced way and with a solid foundation. However, it is a shame that only his crops seem to have that effect. If his harvest were larger and everyone could improve through it, the demons would be nothing more than helpless weaklings. However, he could not plant only those special crops because he needed to maintain a disguise, so he had to grow plenty of normal crops outside as well. Otherwise, what was inside the greenhouse would be noticed very quickly, and that could cause problems for him. One day later, he was teaching his 2 servants how to dig, and after just one explanation, they immediately began working. He is quite pleased because ever since he obtained those assistants, the speed of his planting has skyrocketed. However, one of his summons was eating one of his crops. The protagonist looks at it and realizes that the level 6 temporary undead lizard is experiencing a temporary increase in bone density, which consequently increases its defense as well. He compares that lizard with others of the same type he had captured inside the dungeon, and realizes that the only difference between them is that one of them had just eaten a potato. Apparently, the original effects of his plants also work on the undead. Over the next few days, Lin Feng begins conducting systematic experiments and records how each plant affects the undead. A man appears in the middle of the protagonist's farmland and finds everything extremely bizarre because those things were not there the first time he came to spy on the place, and a wall as thin as paper can easily be cut through. After spying a little more, he realizes that there is only one person there and thinks that perhaps it could be a trap. When he steps on something, he quickly moves away as a bomb appears and causes a small explosion. But the man manages to avoid any kind of injury because that type of defense does not work against him. However, several other bombs appear, causing multiple explosions at the same time. It is almost as if the spirit of nature is lifting those bombs into the air to drive the enemy away. The man thinks that if it were not for the sake of gaining the Grand Duke's trust, he would not have come there twice. But once he manages to slice all those bombs into pieces, they will no longer be able to explode. He begins destroying all the plants directly in front of him, but when he cuts them apart, he wonders what is happening, because those monsters truly have an undead aura mixed into their essence. The man remembers that his real mission during that reconnaissance trip to Fengchuan City is to find the necromancer He Xiao, because according to their last contact, that man had an agreement with their clan. The man becomes somewhat confused, wondering whether this really could be He Xiao's hideout and why he would be hiding there. It is possible that he betrayed the clan. However, the man knows that the necromancer has absolutely no shame when it comes to his immortality techniques, so it is better to retreat since his main objective, which was finding him, has already been accomplished. The next day, the protagonist wakes up thinking that he had already catalyzed and fertilized most of the plots the previous day and now only needs to take care of the remaining areas. However, the protagonist is shocked to see that his greenhouse has been attacked by something. Suddenly, a dragon appears in the sky and he wonders what the inspection team is doing there. A man with glasses says that According to the magic detector, the source of the magical aura is right there. The other man asked whether that place was not supposed to be a training wasteland, so how did it turn into something like that? And perhaps there is a demon hiding there. The young man with glasses realizes that the land has been leased. He explains that the place has already been rented by someone, but even so, they cannot rule out demonic activity, so they need to remain alert. Outside the barrier, the two greet the protagonist and say that they are from the law enforcement team. Lin Feng does not know why those people suddenly decided to come there. The young man with glasses explains that their device detected a magical aura coming from that area, so they would like him to open the barrier and let them enter to take a look around. The other man explains that they also do not know the exact situation, but the protagonist asks how a magical aura could suddenly be appearing on land that he rented only a few days ago. Suddenly, another man with a terrifying aura arrives and asks why it takes them so long just to make a farmer open a barrier. Tuca was killed by demons, and now demonic energy has appeared right there, so in his opinion, that boy is clearly a demonic spy. This makes the protagonist become somewhat more serious. The first two men realize that Haru is being a little impulsive, but that is somewhat understandable. Tuca had just died, and now demonic energy has appeared right there, so Lin Feng truly is highly suspicious. They once again ask the protagonist to cooperate with the investigation and open the barrier. Lin Feng realizes that he will have to find a way to make those people leave. He pretends to be pitiful, saying that his profession is extremely humble, and because of that, no one has ever truly respected him throughout his entire life. That is why he only wanted a peaceful place where he could focus on his cultivation. But now, even the law enforcement team is trying to place that suspicion on his shoulders. The young man with glasses tells his captain that the protagonist looks extremely pitiful, so perhaps. Haru shouts that anyone can put on an act like that. Irritated, he simply charges at the protagonist and throws an extremely powerful punch. Lin Feng manages to catch his opponent's fist and thinks that things are beginning to get out of control because his body is so strong that the punch did not cause him any damage at all. However, for now, he needs to pretend. Otherwise, he may have to eliminate all three of them. The protagonist throws himself to the ground, but Haru still thinks that he really is suspicious because he had put a great deal of strength into that blow, so the boy should have been dead. Lin Feng asks whether he is really trying to beat a confession out of someone just to close the case once and for all. Another member of the group asks Haru to calm down a little and take a proper look because the protagonist's body is filled with nature energy and demons hate anything connected to nature. Even a 6-year-old child knows that. The young man with glasses helps the protagonist back to his feet and apologizes because apparently they made a mistake since his nature energy is extremely pure, and they will make sure to explain that in detail in their report. Lin Feng is satisfied and says that they are simply doing their duty and nothing more. Haru, still suspicious, tries to attack once again, but the other two step in front of him and he realizes that he will not be able to do anything now. Because of that, they simply leave. However, that serves as a warning to the protagonist because apparently he will not be able to simply take care of his new farm. He also needs enough strength to protect himself. A message arrives informing him that he must report to the Academy's training ground early in the morning for his skill test and ranking battles, and attendance is mandatory. However, the protagonist does not understand why it is so difficult to live a peaceful life. Some distance away, two people are watching the protagonist. One of them is the investigation director. The woman beside him is surprised by the incredibly pure and powerful nature magic emanating from the protagonist. She asks whether that boy really is just a farmer. The investigation director says that he is not sure because his profession is registered in the system as spiritual farmer master. However, he finds the whole thing a little too strange and asks what she thinks because she is Vila, the great level 50 nature archer, and even she has taken an interest in that boy. Vela explains that it appears to be a mutant profession. In addition, she senses that the boy is hiding some other secret. Even so, that display of nature magic alone is enough to eliminate any suspicion that he is helping the demons. They could never fake the life energy that disgusts them so much. The director thinks she is right, and that should silence some people for the time being, but they need to leave because the real show is still to come. At the Extraordinary Academy, on the freshmen's training grounds, several people are gathered and some of them ask what is happening. However, the protagonist remains silent as always, observing everything around him. The instructor appears and asks everyone to be quiet because she knows that they all have many questions, such as why the academy is conducting a general test after the instructor interviews. She explains that urgent military news arrived from the front lines the previous day. The demons' attacks have intensified, and the fortress outside the third barrier is on the verge of falling. The academy has received direct orders and must immediately send a new group of reinforcements to support the front lines. This makes some students worried because they only just entered the academy and have not even attended their first class. The instructor continues by saying that when the nest is destroyed, no egg remains intact. Therefore, if the fortress falls, the demon army will march directly toward Fengchuan City. Because of that, she would like to ask whether they truly believe they will be able to cultivate safely in that place if such a thing happens. On top of that, this is not a request, but a conscription order. During a crisis facing humanity, no one can remain uninvolved. Ailing and her sister are also there. Just by looking at the protagonist, her face grows warm, and she thinks that he is extremely extraordinary, wondering whether he will also be selected for the conscription. The instructor asks all the freshmen to enter the training ground as instructed and prepare for the live combat test. Lin Feng thinks that he is just a farmer, so there is no way those people would throw him onto the front lines, because if they do, all of his work will be wasted. The first fight is the protagonist. A woman says that he is the spiritual farmer master, and that she heard he is very good at running away and leaving others behind, so she is going to burn him to ashes with her fire. She tries to attack him, but he dodges easily, saying that her attack is far too slow, not to mention that her magic is not concentrated enough, and that with fire like that, she could not even roast the sweet potatoes from his field. The girl becomes irritated and starts making a bunch of movements to invoke her new attack skill, but the protagonist does not have that much patience and sends her flying with a single strike. After that, he wins 6 more battles in a row. He thinks that defeating all those people should already be good enough, so he can lose the next one and relax a little. Vela hands him some water and says that with all that talent and potential, he is more than qualified to aim for a much higher level than where he is now. Lin Feng asks what she's talking about. Vela explains that he can earn credits and pass the evaluations. That way, he can be promoted to the more advanced Sunwheel Academy. There, they have better cultivation techniques, stronger instructors, and the protagonist may even be able to obtain legendary weapons or powerful magical materials. Lin Feng thanks her for the offer but declines, because he does not need any of that. She is surprised and asks what he truly wants. Lin Feng has only one goal, which is to obtain an even larger and better piece of land so that he can take care of his farm in peace. Vela thinks that perhaps he misunderstood something. She meant what he is truly planning and what his ultimate goal is, because he probably intends to do something else after finishing cultivating those fields. The protagonist says that he plans to cultivate even more land and allow more people to have land to farm. That way, everyone who wants to cultivate will have a field to work on. Vela thinks that the boy is truly ambitious in his own way because he wants to dominate all the surrounding land. The investigation director says that if he is not mistaken, the protagonist is already working on that wasteland west of the city and asks whether that is not enough. Lin Feng explains that when it comes to farming, the more land the better. His name is called for another battle. The protagonist says that it is time to go and stands up to enter the arena. The director thinks that the boy is very straightforward, but Vela thinks that if the boy wants that, then they should simply give it to him. The director asks whether she is really planning to take him as her student. The Archmage explains that he is a very interesting boy. Ailing is his next opponent. She points out that she really did not expect to fight him, but even so, she will give it everything she has in that battle. However, the protagonist says that honestly he does not think he can win, so he was planning to surrender, but she charges forward thinking that this might be some kind of insult. Lin Feng is surprised to see that she's already going straight into the second phase right from the start. He tries to restrain her to avoid a direct attack, but she manages to break free with ease. Vela and the investigation director continue watching the fight. She says that a student below level 10 possessing such pure magic is astonishing. The director agrees, saying that the first time he saw it, he was shocked as well. Vela points out that even that person who has already reached level 80 on the path of nature does not possess magic as pure as his, and that boy's future truly has no limits. The director thinks she is right because he managed to accomplish all of that on his own. Imagine what kind of results he could achieve if he had a teacher guiding him from the very beginning. Vela has already made up her mind because she is going to try to make that boy her teacher, no matter what it takes. The director thinks that is an excellent idea because if she really becomes his instructor, then he suddenly realizes that she said it the other way around. However, Vela explains that she did not make a mistake at all because she was serious when she said that she wanted that boy to become her teacher. The director says that cannot happen and that the demons have probably already fried her brain, but she insists that even if that is true, she still wants to become that boy's disciple. The battle between the two is still ongoing. Ailing tries to attack him in every possible way, but The protagonist manages to dodge. However, he had already demonstrated enough strength, so now all he needed to do was leave an opening for her to defeat him. Suddenly, someone else says that if he keeps holding back, the Academy will reclaim the land he obtained in the Western District and give it to someone else. Lin Feng thinks there is absolutely no way he can let that happen. He decides to fight seriously, and she notices that his aura suddenly changes. Before, he had only been defending passively, but now he is finally starting to take the fight seriously. The protagonist prepares to attack, but Ailing does not fall behind and tries to hit him with a fireball. However, the protagonist easily dodges it and uses his half-serious punch. Before hitting her, he stops the attack, leaving her shocked by the absurd amount of force behind it. The protagonist laughs and thanks her for allowing him to win. The other students realize that the farmer had been hiding his true strength the entire time, and compared with his power, they were the ones who belonged out in the backyard. Vela becomes even more excited when she sees his instinctive control over the power of nature flowing almost as if it came directly from the source itself. The evaluator announces that the protagonist is the winner. Lin Feng extends his hand toward the beautiful woman kneeling in front of him. She says that he is extremely strong and that she is completely convinced by her defeat. Lin Feng explains that she is actually very strong as well. The difference is that he can hit with terrifying force, but the truth is that he had been worried because he had almost lost his land, and that would have been the end of everything. The investigation director congratulates him, saying that he did quite well. Lin Feng thanks him for going a little easier on him, but the director simply tells him to keep working hard because he is looking forward to seeing how he grows in the future. However, the protagonist is not happy about that at all because that grumpy old man threatened him with his own land and he is not going to forget it. After the other battles, he is walking outside when a woman appears and asks him to guide her cultivation path. Lin Feng is somewhat surprised by the proposal because she is from a combat class and is asking a farmer for guidance. The woman introduces herself, saying that her name is Vila and that they had never met before, but she ended up watching his fight and his use of nature magic was absolutely incredible because she had never seen anyone use the power of nature with such vitality and strength. In addition, she has been stuck at her current level for a long time and feels that the protagonist's path may inspire her to evolve. Lin Feng asks whether she is also a nature-type professional because he heard that the nature instructors are still on the battlefield and have not returned yet, but perhaps she should wait for them. Vela believes that whoever truly understands something should be the one to teach it. She's not asking to become his official disciple, but she would like to visit the fields he tends from time to time so that she can observe and learn a little. Even if she only helps with occasional chores, simply being close to his natural aura would already be enough for her. Lin Feng thinks that he is now in a very complicated situation because he cannot allow anyone to see what he is growing in his fields. He apologizes, saying that he is only a farmer and therefore has nothing he can teach her. Besides, he is only strong because his physique is extremely resilient, but the truth is that he is not good at combat. At that moment, the director approaches and says that the woman is begging so earnestly that the protagonist should accept her and consider it a favor directly to him. Lin Feng still insists that it does not seem right, but after the director quietly says a few things to him, the protagonist finally agrees. Vela becomes extremely excited, thanks him, and promises not to interfere with anything. However, because she is so enthusiastic, she asks whether she can go there immediately. Lin Feng thinks she can do whatever she wants because his land is on the western side of the city. A short while later, as soon as they arrive at the property, Vela starts doing several tasks and asks whether there is anything else she can help with. He thinks that at least her attitude is serious, but he absolutely cannot let her see what is inside the greenhouse. The protagonist thinks the best option is to let her look around outside and familiarize herself with things because, at the moment, he is very busy giving special attention to his newest seedlings. Just by looking, Vila realizes that all those crops are nourished by extremely pure nature magic and provide temporary attribute bonuses because they are advanced crops. This makes her increasingly curious. 1 hour later, he returns and sees her closely examining several things. Vila finds it unbelievable. The protagonist asks whether something happened. Vila asks if he cultivated all of that in completely ordinary soil. The protagonist explains that yes, it is nothing more than ordinary soil. Still curious, Vila asks whether he did not use any magic crystal powder or elemental soil. The protagonist had actually thought about doing that, but those materials are extremely expensive, and with his savings, he could never afford all of them. He shows her one of the plants because it is undernourished. Vila thinks his nature magic is absolutely excellent, and if that is the only problem, then perhaps she can help with something. She explains that the Academy has a rule allowing students to exchange dungeon core materials for specific items from the Academy warehouse. This makes the protagonist a little more excited about the situation. She continues explaining that in a level 10 academy dungeon called the Dark Grove, the final boss, known as the Fallen Shadow Kobold, drops the boss Fang. Perhaps he can exchange that item for a vial of Earth Pulse. But a level 10 dungeon is difficult and usually requires a team of 5 people. However, that rule is about to be cancelled. To take advantage of the situation, Lin Feng thinks that he needs to do it immediately. As he runs off to challenge the dungeon, she simply watches him and thinks that only such a pure and straightforward heart could nourish nature magic as clean as his. A short while later, at the entrance to the dungeon, several awakened individuals stare at the protagonist, wondering what he is doing there, and saying that he probably came to the wrong place. Others remember that he is only the newcomer at level 8, so how could he possibly have the courage to enter a level 10 dungeon? He must be going crazy. Lin Feng hands an envelope to the instructor because he would like to apply for solo entry into the Dark Grove. However, the instructor warns him that his level is far too low and entering alone is extremely risky. But the protagonist gets straight to the point, saying that the academy rules state that all enrolled students are allowed to apply for entry. Therefore, he would like them to help process his request. Vela appears behind the protagonist and one instructor nearly reveals her true identity, but she signals for him to remain silent. The instructor quickly understands what is happening and agrees, saying that the academy rules indeed permit it. However, he needs to know his limits, and if he realizes that he cannot handle it, he must retreat immediately and leave the dungeon. Before he enters, the others keep saying that he cannot possibly be that stupid because he is nothing more than freshly recruited cannon fodder and is not like them who belong to the elite. At best, they think the protagonist will simply die inside because having a freshman like him is an embarrassment to the extraordinary academy. Inside the level 10 dungeon, several monsters charge toward him. Lin Feng calls He Xiao and Yue Ye and asks them to clear the path while all the others follow behind because they're going to crush everything and everyone standing in their way. He wants to finish everything as quickly as possible. Every time he kills a monster, he immediately uses his magic to awaken it and transform it into a new warrior. He easily reaches the final boss, which is level 12. Lin Feng is not surprised in the slightest. In truth, he thinks the dungeon is almost too easy. The boss tries to attack him, but his subordinates move even faster and easily defeat the monster. Because of this, he gains an entire level and reaches level 9. He tries to transform the boss into one of his subordinates, but the system explains that the protagonist's current level is too low, so he is unable to convert the Fallen Shadow Kobold into a summon. His current progress is only 10%. However, he managed to obtain the item he wanted. Lin Feng realizes that he cannot summon monsters whose level is higher than his own, and although that is unfortunate, he still achieved his objective. Now that he has obtained the Fang, it is time to go back and exchange it for fertilizer. Outside, the instructors are asking Vila whether they are really going to make the exchange for him according to the rules because the front lines are in crisis, and resources for combat classes are nearly exhausted. However, she explains that they do not need to worry because those are not resources for combat classes, merely nature-type soil fertilizers. One instructor becomes slightly relieved because they still have some of those in stock. As soon as the protagonist exits the dungeon, the system announces that the Dark Grove has a new solo clear record. The person who completed it was Lin Feng with an SSS rating, and the special reward obtained was a heroic soul fragment. Everyone finds it impossible to believe that he managed to obtain a legendary class item like that, and it must have been some kind of cheating because he's only a level 8 farmer. For that reason, the instructor should investigate him and take back the heroic soul fragment, since he does not deserve something like that. Vila merely laughs because she had thought he would need several attempts at the very least, but she never imagined that he could clear the dungeon on his first try. The protagonist walks over to everyone and asks what he did wrong this time to cause so much trouble. He decides to ignore them all and goes to the instructor because, according to the academy rules, he is there to exchange his rewards for some resources. However, another student says that his rewards were obtained improperly, so they should be confiscated. The instructor tells everyone to be quiet because the rewards he earned came directly from the dungeon, so the academy has no right to confiscate anything. However, the students keep insisting that he cheated and say that they would be willing to make a resource wager. The protagonist asks what that is. The other woman explains that it is basically a competition to see who can finish the dungeon first. With teachers supervising both sides, they will compete, and whoever finishes first takes everything and keeps both sets of rewards, while the loser gets nothing. The instructor asks whether the protagonist is interested in that kind of wager, but he refuses, saying that there is no benefit for him and that it sounds extremely tedious. However, the student keeps insisting, saying that in that case, he can include a nature lamp design blueprint. Vila tells him that he needs to obtain that nature lamp design no matter what, because the nature lamp is a growth-type magical artifact exclusive to nature-type professions. Each blueprint can only be used once, making it extremely rare, and its effects include shortening crop growth cycles without any side effects. The student continues insisting, saying that the protagonist is nothing more than a country bumpkin, and since he just asked so many questions, he wants to know whether he will accept the wager or not. However, that student had been talking with Heru, who had ordered them to keep the protagonist there no matter what, and if necessary, they could even make a resource wager by offering the Nature Lamp blueprint. Lin Feng thinks that he cannot expose his necromancer abilities, but if there is only one teacher supervising, it should probably be easy enough to fool him. On top of that, he needs to obtain that nature lamp, so he accepts. The student thinks that this will be phenomenal because now, with a teacher evaluating them, they will finally be able to expose that cheater once and for all. As soon as they enter the dungeon, the instructor asks the protagonist to show him exactly how he cleared the place. Lin Feng thinks that now is the time to show his true strength. He uses his nature ability to conceal the dark aura of his undead, creating a small army. The instructor is impressed by the speed of the summoning, not to mention that the quality of the squad looks quite remarkable. Now he can see with his own eyes how that boy managed to clear the entire place alone. The protagonist orders his servants to attack with full force. The monsters try to attack him again, but they are easily destroyed. He wipes everything out as quickly as possible, leaving the instructor speechless because it took less than a minute to completely eliminate a kobold patrol squad of the same level. That power is indeed terrifying, and perhaps it is because of the special profession he possesses. Lin Feng tells the instructor that the patrol squad has already been completely eliminated and now they need to clear the boss room. They enter, and the boss immediately charges at them. Lin Feng orders the large bear to advance with its shield raised, while the others follow behind. If any kobold tries to surround them from the sides, they must eliminate it instantly. The bear blocks the boss's attack, also blocking its path, and with a single punch sends the boss flying backward again, knocking it out and ending the fight. The instructor cannot believe that incredible combat power, and someone like that needs to be reported to the director immediately. Lin Feng asks the teacher whether he is satisfied now. The instructor says there is no doubt at all, he has truly proven himself. The two prepare to leave, but the protagonist slows his pace. The instructor asks whether he is not leaving as well. Lin Feng points out that having the instructor as a witness is already enough, and that the scenery there is quite nice, so he would like to explore a little longer. The instructor agrees and says that he will go ahead. In addition, the dungeon resets half an hour after being cleared, so he needs to keep an eye on the time. After defeating all the monsters again, he manages to level up, and although his level had not been high enough before, perhaps now it would work. He touches the boss's body and tells it to rise. The boss's shadow rises and kneels directly in front of its new master. As soon as he leaves the dungeon, everyone notices the monster coming out, and since they had treated the protagonist arrogantly before, perhaps he might hold a grudge. Because of that, they need to move out of the way and avoid causing any trouble. The instructor states that, in the name of the Extraordinary Academy, Lin Feng has proven himself, and therefore, here are the rewards that rightfully belong to him along with his compensation. Lin Feng keeps looking to the side. Vila notices and asks what happened, because after the supervisor left, that guy realized he was wrong, dropped everything, and ran away. However, the protagonist is already happy with his fertilizer, because he managed to obtain a considerable amount. The instructor hands over the memory stone that recorded the protagonist's battle and says that perhaps she would like to take a look at it. Meanwhile, in Heru's room, he is extremely furious because that ignorant farmer dared to humiliate him again. Using force will not work, and the academy rules cannot deal with that boy either, so he needs to use a different method. The protagonist is always showing off that little bit of nature magic in his summons. Therefore, he orders his subordinate to deliver that letter immediately to the front lines for his uncle, the Count, and ask him to make the nature-type instructors who are rotating on the battlefield return to the academy as quickly as possible. His friend asks whether he is really planning to use the nature instructors to suppress the protagonist. Heru says yes because those old-fashioned elders value the purity and rules of nature, magic above everything else. Therefore, they can let those people deal with the protagonist, and after that they will see whether he can still be as arrogant as he is now. In her room, Vila is watching the recording of the protagonist's battle. She thinks that it is simply monstrous, and that his understanding of the power of nature has become something pure and instinctive. He fights using the power of nature as if it were an extension of his own body. Because of that, she needs to send a letter immediately telling those old fossils to return to the academy as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the lifetime achievement prize they have been searching for will fly away. For several consecutive days, Lin Feng practically lives inside the dungeons, breaking every record one after another. He's so strong and so fast that all the best records now bear his name. As soon as he comes out of the dungeon, the others waiting outside say that he is clearing everything alone as quickly as possible and treating that place as if it were his own backyard. They have already lost count of how many times he has done it in the same day. He goes to Instructor Chen to exchange everything for fertilizer once again. The instructor explains that he has already accumulated enough credits to apply for promotion, and that remaining in the lower academy no longer makes sense for him. Therefore, he would like to suggest that the protagonist attempt promotion to the upper academy. The Extraordinary Academy is divided into upper and lower divisions. The lower division trains basic talents such as his current Storm Academy. Sunwheel Academy, on the other hand, is where the elites from all the lower academies gather, and it is known as the Upper Academy. Once someone enters Sunwheel, the rewards they can exchange for, both in quantity and variety, far exceed what the lower academy can offer. That is where a genius like the protagonist should have been from the very beginning. Lin Feng thinks about what he just heard and thanks the instructor for explaining everything. In the Academy Mission Hall, he says that he is there to apply for promotion to Sunwheel Academy. The woman asks him to state his name, department, and provide proof of his credits. As soon as she takes his card to check it, she realizes that he has more than 30,000 credit points. The other students are also impressed because, if they are not mistaken, the protagonist is that same guy who keeps clearing the Dark Grove like a madman, and they have already lost count of how many times he has done it. After verifying his credits, the woman hands him a promotion mission scroll. He needs to complete the mission and pass the review in order to officially become a member of Sunwheel Academy. Lin Feng asks whether, after being promoted, he will be able to exchange for gold-level supplements. The woman says yes. At his current stage, he can only exchange credits for bronze or silver-level items, but after the promotion, he will be able to exchange them for rare gold or platinum-level supplements. He thinks that now he needs to head to the defense perimeter outside the city and find something. Since the place is close to his property, it should not be too difficult, but first he needs to pick something up. He goes to someone who hands him the nature lamp, explaining that it is silver level, but its effects are no worse than those of gold-level items. However, he needs to be careful not to let death energy contaminate it. Lin Feng thanks him for the explanation and tries to walk away unnoticed because he had heard that the nature lamp cannot be contaminated by death energy, but for some reason, he feels in his heart that he should test it. As soon as he applies his energy, the item changes, releasing a terrifying aura. He realizes that it has transformed directly from a nature-type item into an undead-type item. He returns it to normal and hides it as quickly as possible, thinking that he was extremely lucky the thing had a spiritual connection that allowed him to use nature magic to transform it back. Otherwise, he would have been in serious trouble because there would have been no way to explain it. Back at his property, he hangs the item near the crops and its energy begins to take effect. He's impressed by the power of the nature lamp because, on its very first use, it already causes the crops to grow extremely quickly. This makes him even more excited because the Extraordinary Academy probably has even more items like that, and apparently, he needs to complete his promotion mission as quickly as possible. However, as soon as he leaves his property, Yue Ye becomes curious about what his master left hanging there and decides to touch it. Sometime later, outside the abandoned watchtower, the protagonist realizes that this is the mission location. Since it is a search mission with extremely low visibility, he needs to be a little more careful. He notices several footprints on the ground and realizes that they are very fresh, meaning someone was there not long ago. He hears a noise from above. Two people are there, and one of them says that they need to hurry because the young master told them to take the item before the protagonist arrives, causing him to fail the mission. The other says that he already found it and tells his companion to keep his voice down because that Lin Feng guy could appear at any moment. However, his companion does not understand why they are afraid because, when the time comes, all they need to do is burn it with fire magic and everything will be solved. Once the item is completely destroyed, he will have no way to complete the mission. But as soon as they throw the book downward, the protagonist catches it and asks whether he should thank them. The two are surprised and say that everything is their fault, but they need to recover the book immediately. They try to attack the protagonist, but both of them are defeated within seconds. Lin Feng says that the two of them owe him a good explanation about what is happening there. Outside his property at nightfall, the protagonist is extremely irritated with Hiru because if this continues, sooner or later he will end up being exposed. However, when he enters his property, he is surprised to see Yue Ye carrying the nature lamp and making the other companions work. This actually makes him a little happier because he can see that the item is working automatically. In Haru's room, his assistant tells the young master that they sent people to inspect the watchtower, but they found no one. In addition, traces of their magic were found at the scene, and most likely they are already dead. Haru becomes furious, saying that they are useless and cannot even handle something as simple as that. This makes him think that the protagonist actually had the courage to eliminate his men. He orders his subordinate to contact Shadow Corrosion and offer the highest possible price because he wants that boy's head immediately. Haru is certain that the protagonist was the one who killed Tuka. Back at the Academy's admission hall, one of the instructors congratulates him because he is now officially a member of Sunwheel Academy and wishes that he may always continue on the path of seeking the truth. In addition, he also receives a new school uniform and a new student badge. Lin Feng becomes excited because after being promoted, he will be able to earn more credits to buy even more planting supplies. Back at the Dark Grove dungeon, the protagonist hands over his new badge and says that he would like to request entry into the dungeon, but the instructor says that unfortunately he cannot. Lin Feng is somewhat confused because it was allowed before. The instructor explains that, according to Academy regulations, in order to preserve advancement resources and opportunities for students of the lower academy, students from the upper academy are prohibited from challenging dungeons at level 10 or below. Lin Feng becomes upset when he realizes that they will no longer allow him to farm that dungeon because he really wanted to level up a little more before leaving. The instructor is relieved that he is going away because if that boy stayed there any longer, he would definitely empty the university's entire stockpile. Lin Feng now has a major problem because his most efficient resource farming route has simply been taken away from him. Suddenly, someone appears in front of the protagonist and asks whether he is the freshman who was just promoted, Lin Feng. The young man introduces himself as Ron, saying that he saw the protagonist walking around and assumes that he's having trouble finding a good mission. He explains that his team accepted a gathering mission inside a dungeon and that they are missing one person. Lin Feng finds this somewhat suspicious because the man appeared exactly when he needed something, making it far too convenient. Ron insists, asking whether the protagonist is not interested in joining because it would give him a good opportunity to become familiar with the difficulty of the Upper Academy's dungeons. Lin Feng thinks that he does indeed need credits to exchange for supplements, and at the moment, he also needs to learn more about Sunwheel Academy's dungeons. If it is only a gathering mission, there should not be any major problem, so he decides to accept. Ron is happy with the good news, but now they need to leave because the others are already waiting at the dungeon entrance. When they arrive at the dungeon, Ron introduces Ube and Carter as his teammates. Their objective is to collect moonlight grass deep inside the forest. The mission requires 10 plants in total, and, according to the information, dark elf patrols are everywhere, so they need to avoid combat whenever possible and focus only on gathering. Once inside the dungeon, they begin collecting, but suddenly a patrol approaches. The elves try to attack, but Ron blocks the first strike and tells the team to get into position while the protagonist uses his nature magic to distract them, because dark elves hate that kind of magic. Lin Feng manages to neutralize the elves, and Ron defeats them with a single move. However, he realizes that this is not good, because reinforcements are probably already on the way, so it is time for them to truly begin. Carter opens a crater in the ground, causing the dark elves and the protagonist to fall, but Lin Feng manages to grab onto the edge. Ron apologizes to the freshman, saying that Carter only recently learned that skill and still does not have much practice with it, so he accidentally hit a teammate. Lin Feng asks them to make it a little clearer whether they are saying that they have no intention of rescuing him. Ron laughs and says that the truth is that they do not want to save him because he had just been promoted to the upper academy, became overconfident, and challenged an elite monster by himself. Unfortunately, he died, and there was nothing they could do. The protagonist asks whether they are really not worried about killing a fellow student. Ron explains that Sunwheel Academy student badges undergo special processing that allows them to record powerful magical energies. After the protagonist dies, they will erase his badge and record the elite monster's magic onto it. Lin Feng says that he has only one final question and asks whether there truly is no other way for anyone to know what is happening there. Ron tells the protagonist to have a little more faith in their professional expertise because they have done this many times before. Lin Feng thinks that now everything has been explained. He lets go of the edge of the cliff with a calm expression. Ron thinks he's doing that because he knows there is no way to resist and has decided to simply die, but then he is shocked. The protagonist begins to fly and asks whether they are prepared to face his legion. His small army appears, surrounding the three of them, and with a single attack, defeats everyone. Ron realizes that those are undead, and asks whether the protagonist is actually a necromancer, because that should be impossible. Lin Feng asks whether those are really the last words he wants to say. Ron tries to beg for his life. asking whether they can at least talk things over because they have no real conflict, and everything was arranged by Heru. They admit that they were wrong to do something like this. However, the protagonist says that they are not sorry at all, they simply know that they are about to die. Ron explains that Heru believes Lin Feng killed Tuka, but he can testify in the protagonist's favor and say that it is not true. Lin Feng asks who this Tuka guy is. For a moment, Ron refuses to answer. Lin Feng tells him to forget it because it no longer matters and orders his servants to attack. Ube and Carter had already been eliminated in that attack, but Ron still managed to survive, cursing the protagonist and wishing him a terrible death. Lin Feng tells him that their good days are only beginning. He finishes off the last survivor and orders them to rise and serve their new master. Lin Feng still wonders whether his undead created from humanoid creatures naturally possess greater intelligence than the others. He looks at the 3 badges and notices that they contain the magical power of those shadow elves from earlier, and apparently he does not even need to do any cleanup. However, since people died, it is probably better to go back and report it immediately. He realizes that something is wrong and that he cannot leave the dungeon. The system appears, informing him that a special item called Laments of the Past has taken effect, and that until the dungeon is clear, the exit cannot be opened. In addition, all of his attributes inside the dungeon have increased to 200%. Suddenly, a terrifying aura begins approaching, and the protagonist is surprised to see an enormous horse with a man riding on top of it. He thinks that dealing with the situation does not seem very difficult. He gives the order and his warriors attack, knocking the man off the horse. Ube uses his agility with the bow to strike the man before he even hits the ground. Lin Feng notices that his undead seem to have stronger instincts this time and can even cooperate with one another, but it still feels as though something is missing. The elf asks why the protagonist can use the power of death. Lin Feng, with a charming smile, asks whether the man failed to understand last time and tells him to just die once and for all. The black bear strikes the man from behind while several more arrows are fired at him, easily eliminating the monster. The mission progress has already reached 50%. Lin Feng realizes that this is a dungeon with 2 bosses, and apparently he needs to go even deeper. As he walks through the forest, he notices an altar directly ahead with strange energy surrounding it. An elf woman asks why he has invaded that sacred ground. Lin Feng cannot understand what she is saying and asks whether she speaks the human language because, if she does not, he is simply going to start fighting. She is Guardian Savis, level 18. She begins releasing her magic, and a red aura fills the area. A screen appears in front of the protagonist. He is pleased because this means that inside this dungeon, his undead summons do not even require his magical power to remain active, and the laments of the past are truly incredible. He orders his subordinates to crush everything and everyone in their path. Outside, a man is thinking that there is no problem, because even if Ron and the others failed, the final boss is still there. The laments of the past do not merely increase attributes, they also lock the dungeon itself. And with that kind of boss inside, even with a 400% attribute bonus, defeating it would be impossible. Just thinking about it makes him excited because everything is going perfectly. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, Yue Ye is bringing Savis to his master, who's enjoying a banana. She looks at He Xiao and asks why he betrayed everyone. He Xiao looks somewhat confused. Savis continues saying that he destroyed her incubation nest and that she will find him. At that moment, a powerful energy begins destroying the area. A message appears in front of the protagonist, informing him that the Dark Grove has been cleared with a completion time of 2 hours and 17 minutes, setting a new record and earning an A rating. He thinks that is not bad at all and can even feel himself becoming stronger. An enormous egg appears in front of him. It is the primordial demon embryo, a mythical item that cannot currently be activated. The description states that it is a seed of life left behind after the fall of an ancient primordial demon, requires special conditions to hatch, and is currently dormant. In addition, it possesses an intense 30% affinity with the aura of death. Lin Feng still does not understand anything at all. He has a black egg, and an incubation nest was mentioned during the conversation, but he decides to simply store the item and leave the dungeon. Before leaving, however, he looks at Savis and thinks that she is a level 18 boss, so turning her into an undead would cost a great deal, but once converted, she should be at least on the same level as He Xiao. Then the phrase everyone wants to hear is spoken. Arise. Savi stands up and introduces herself, saying that she is the executor of death. The protagonist is surprised to see that she can speak. He asks whether she can actually understand him, but she merely repeats that she is the executor of death. Outside, everyone is shocked to see that he cleared the Dark Grove alone because even teams of 5 people often die inside that dungeon. Another man sees that he came out alone and asks where the other students are. Lin Feng begins explaining that they were gathering moonlight grass when a huge group of dark elves ambushed them, and they became separated. He barely managed to escape deeper into the dungeon and accidentally triggered the boss battle, surviving only through sheer luck. However, the other three probably were not as fortunate. The man examines the residue on the badge and confirms that it does indeed belong to the Dark Elves, but the man standing before him becomes even more irritated. An instructor asks the protagonist whether he encountered anything unusual inside. Lin Feng explains that after entering, he received an effect called Laments of the Past. The instructor is surprised and asks whether he has made any enemies recently. The man from earlier, whom he suspects is Heiru in disguise, continues staring at the protagonist, trying to understand how a single person could defeat that boss because there is no way someone alone could emerge unharmed after defeating it. Lin Feng looks directly at the man who arranged everything and when asked about enemies says that he has no idea because he was only recently transferred to Sunwheel Academy. The instructor says that he understands and promises to investigate the matter more thoroughly and ensure that justice is served. The young man becomes somewhat more apprehensive about the situation. During the night, back at his farm, the protagonist thinks that everything seemed fine outside the dungeon, but now that he has returned home, the embryo has suddenly become restless. He remembers what Savis said before she died and wonders whether that embryo had been deliberately placed inside the dungeon to be cultivated. When he touches the egg, he realizes that it can be influenced by both of his types of magic at the same time. This confuses him because death magic and nature magic normally cannot coexist, so why is this happening? The only explanation is that the embryo might be similar to him and somehow be capable of allowing both types of magic to coexist within it. However, the protagonist quickly dismisses that possibility because he is human, while that embryo clearly appears to be something created by the demon race. Perhaps there is only one way to deal with it. He goes to the director's office and says that something like this is extremely difficult to explain, so it would be better for the director to see it for himself. He places the black egg on the floor and the director takes a look at it, asking where he found the embryo. Lin Feng explains that he found it inside the Dark Grove dungeon. It appeared after he defeated the final boss. At first, he thought it was merely an ordinary item, but the director interrupts the protagonist and says that it is the embryo of a primordial demon, and that there is no possibility of being mistaken. The demon race managed to bypass detection and cultivate these things inside dungeons. Lin Feng asks what a primordial demon is. The director explains that they are one of the units of the demon race. They feed on humans and gain tremendous power by hunting them. Some can even cross through space. There are Standard Type 1, Standard Type 4, and the Blood Nest Lord. Those primordial demons that gain the ability to cross space use dungeon mechanics to plant seeds or embryos. They use the battles, deaths, and magical fluctuations of adventurers as nourishment to hatch in secret. When the embryo matures, it breaks out of the dungeon and manifests in reality, and this one must have only recently entered its growth stage. If chaos erupted inside the academy, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, what the director finds most intriguing is that this type of embryo hides itself extremely well, and normally would not appear unless a similar aura were nearby. Therefore, the protagonist should already understand what he is implying. Lin Feng becomes somewhat worried that he has been discovered, but the director was only teasing him because Lin Feng did the academy a favor by bringing the embryo to them. Therefore, for both personal and professional reasons, he has no intention of doing anything to the protagonist. After all, everyone has secrets, and the academy respects that greatly, as long as he does not harm the academy or cross moral boundaries. The academy is willing to give geniuses plenty of room to grow without any problem. However, the director needs Lin Feng to promise him one thing. No matter what kind of power he possesses, he must always remember that he is a student of Sunwheel Academy and a member of the human faction. The protagonist bows and tells the director that he will always remember that and will never abandon humanity. The director shows him a small flag, explaining that it is a territory flag and will be given to him as a reward for turning over the embryo, as well as an investment in his potential. He only needs to plant it in a piece of land he considers worthy, and it will create an initial territorial barrier with a radius of 500 meters, while also allowing a certain degree of terrain modification. Lin Feng is impressed by the reward because the flag contains extremely dense law-based power, and that is exactly what his farm needs. The director says that if there is nothing else to deal with, the protagonist can go rest now because he will send someone to take care of everything immediately. Before Lin Feng leaves, the director points out that there will be a freshman exchange gathering in the Academy Auditorium in 3 days, and he can go meet his classmates. In addition, a nature-type instructor submitted a very interesting research topic before leaving for the front lines, involving plant cultivation and hybridization. Lin Feng becomes somewhat interested because, until now, He had only combined undead and plants in a rather crude way, but if he performs complete hybridization, things might change considerably. As soon as he returns to his farm, he plants the flag he received as a reward in the ground, and after doing so, the concentration of nature magic gradually rises. However, he finds that combining everything is still extremely difficult to understand. Then he notices that something is happening with Savis. Meanwhile, in his room, the man from before thinks that all of this is useless because he cannot even deal with a brat who was only recently promoted. He cannot wait any longer because the investigation at Sunwheel Academy has already uncovered some clues. And if they discover that he killed Tuka, everything could come to an end once and for all. He opens a secret passage and heads to the basement of his house, where something extremely sinister is being kept. He draws some of his own blood. As soon as the monster awakens, it calls the young man Heru and reprimands him, saying that it had told him not to disturb it unless there was an emergency. Heru tells the great Guladosa that his humble servant seeks guidance because that anomaly called Lin Feng is interfering with his planting plan. He then asks how he should deal with the situation. Guladosa asks why he is considered an anomaly, because those who try to defy fate will be punished by fate itself. And for that reason, she will send someone to deal with that brat immediately. Heru thanks her for the help, but asks her to do it as quickly as possible, otherwise he will remain worried. Guladosa attacks Heru and warns him never to give orders to a superior being. Covered in injuries, Heru shouts that all of this is the protagonist's fault, but Savis, who had been investigating the entire situation, had already reported everything that was happening to her master. A short while later, at the freshman exchange gathering in the Academy auditorium, Lin Feng finds the entire event extremely boring and thinks that he should not have listened to the director's nonsense because he could have spent that time researching how to fuse his plants back at the farm. He decides to eat a little and realizes that the food does not taste that bad. Another student approaches and asks for the protagonist. The young man sits across from him and says that he heard Lin Feng clear the Dark Grove dungeon alone and that it is truly incredible. Because of that, he would like to hear some advice. Lin Feng thinks that this person seems somewhat strange because everyone else has been avoiding him. Yet this boy deliberately came straight over to talk to him. He pretends to cry and says that he would rather not talk about it because 3 senior students ended up being killed inside that dungeon. The young man apologizes, telling the protagonist not to be sad and saying that he is sorry for bringing up such a painful subject. They can talk about the advice another day. However, the young man is somewhat surprised, wondering whether this really is the person Lord Guladosa wants him to eliminate because he does not seem like much. But the protagonist was already suspicious of everything. Meanwhile, at his house, Heru thinks that the Iron Lion Duke, the nature instructors, and Guladosa have all been notified. So why does he still feel somewhat uneasy? Suddenly, darkness appears on the floor, saying that feeling uneasy is the correct reaction. He becomes frightened and asks who is there. The protagonist appears with the Reaper. Lin Feng asks how many it has been so far and raises one finger. Heru asks whether the number is 1, and the protagonist says yes before punching him in the face and saying that he has tolerated this for far too long. Heru asks how he got inside, but the protagonist gets straight to the point and asks whether what happened inside that dungeon was his doing. Heru cannot believe that this piece of trash dared to hit him and uses the demon race's forbidden art, blood sacrifice. His body begins to transform. The protagonist realizes that this is a forbidden demon technique, which means that man is a spy. Heru laughs, saying that he is not a spy, but a faithful follower of Guladosa from the very beginning. The protagonist is surprised because she is the 7th demon queen, and Heru truly is connected to her. Heru becomes furious when he hears the protagonist say his queen's name so casually and declares that he deserves to die. However, before he can attack, Savis steps in front of him, but his arm releases an extremely powerful corrosive force that damages the scythe she is using. Lin Feng thinks that he only came there to test Heru, but now he has gotten himself into a major mess. Savis restores her scythe and Heru releases even more of his power because he had already been thinking about how to eliminate the protagonist, and now the opportunity has simply fallen into his lap. Lin Feng thinks that the only way to deal with this is to finish everything once and for all while that man is still distracted. He summons the rest of his undead. Heru sees the power of an undead and thinks that the protagonist really is far too suspicious. Apparently, his friend Tuka did not sacrifice himself for nothing, because they really did manage to draw out a human genius. The dark elf manages to restrain Heru, and the protagonist asks whether he really killed Tuka. However, Heru uses blood as a catalyst and his soul as a bridge, allowing the will of his mistress to descend into his body. Now they must tremble before the arrival of the demon queen, and her name is Guladosa. But as soon as she appears, she punches her subordinate in the face and says that an insignificant insect like him dared to call her true name. Lin Feng orders his army to attack and restrain that demon. Guladosa is surprised to see that he truly is a necromancer, which means that He Xiao really was defeated. She blocks the attack but realizes that her summoner is far too weak and that his magical power cannot sustain the defensive seal. She absorbs Heru and throws the remains of his body backward because that way she can properly fight the necromancer's successor. Lin Feng thinks that even if he used all of his undead, he still would not be strong enough to defeat that monster, so fighting her head-on would be an extremely bad idea. Even so, he comes up with an excellent plan. He adopts a slightly more arrogant posture and calls the demon an idiot because, even knowing that he is a necromancer, instead of running away, she decided to challenge him, which is somewhat interesting. He orders his subordinates to attack. Guladosa thinks that this is merely his way of provoking her, so they can do whatever they want. However, even with the protagonist using all of his attacks, she still says that it is far too weak and asks how he managed to defeat He Xiao. She tries to counterattack, but the protagonist defends himself and says that before she dies, he will allow her to say her final words. Guladosa thinks that he is a pathetic successor because he understands nothing about the power of the undead. However, the protagonist thinks that she is wrong and that apparently the one who understands nothing about the power of the undead is actually her. He noticed earlier that as soon as she appeared, she chose to drain Heru's magic but spared his life, which meant that the person used for the summoning had also lost a great deal of power. That was when he realized that her summoning still had many restrictions. As soon as Yue Ye kills Heru, Guladosa begins losing her vital energy, and apparently he had been right from the beginning and his gamble paid off. Guladosa curses the protagonist and promises that he will not get away with all of this, but he remains calm and says that he will be waiting for her return. Suddenly, several people notice all the commotion and shout that something major is happening there and that they need to investigate immediately. Lin Feng thinks that the situation is becoming far too dangerous and that he needs to leave immediately. Back at his fortress at dawn, his magical power is already almost completely exhausted, and that was far too close. If he had not won that final gamble, he would probably be dead. At that moment, his spatial barrier is breached, and the protagonist asks who is there. The young man from earlier appears and says that he was in the middle of handling another mission when his mistress suddenly canceled everything, which made him quite irritated. If it is not too much to ask, he would like the protagonist to simply stand still and let him finish the job quickly. Lin Feng calls for his summons to appear, but realizes that all of his undead have just been defeated, and his body is completely drained of magic, so he is unable to summon them. The young man notices this and quickly charges forward. Lin Feng manages to dodge the first few attacks and remembers that the bone lantern strengthens the undead, so if he can get his hands on it, perhaps he can turn the situation around. However, he does not have much time. The spirit of nature tells him to retreat, and the protagonist simply obeys. Suddenly, something begins emerging from the ground and moves in front of the young man, knocking him backward. Even the protagonist is surprised to see that it is grabbing onto his body. However, the young man thinks that it is nothing more than a cheap trick and uses magic fusion, ridiculously handsome sword style, cutting through it with relative ease. When he sees the protagonist running away, he remembers that he had been pursuing someone when his mistress appeared and ordered him to cancel his current mission and stop chasing that man. However, he does not understand why she was doing that because that noble is a key piece in their plan, and if they do not kill him now, he will bring guards, which will make many things much more difficult. Guladosa asks whether he is really questioning her decision, but the pressure forces him to his knees, and he simply falls silent. His mistress tells him that he needs to follow the mark she left on that boy because it will lead him to the protagonist, and as soon as he finds him, he must eliminate him at all costs. However, even after he cuts down those first plants, more grow in their place. He uses his fire magic to blow everything apart, saying that the protagonist will not escape. The plants continue attacking him, but he dodges everything and manages to grab the protagonist, saying that it is all over. Lin Feng agrees because things truly have come to an end. However, the protagonist realizes that his necromancer magic is not enough to provide energy to the bone lantern, but as long as it shines for him, everything will be resolved. He decides to use his nature magic, and the lantern begins to glow. The entire area enters a state of alert, and the plants restrain the young man who is trying to attack him. However, that is not enough to contain him. He manages to break free and uses demonic battle art shadow devouring assault, creating several clones to attack the protagonist. But Lin Feng has already managed to recover some of his power. He summons He Xiao wrapped in the power of nature, and he easily defeats the young man. The young man is shocked and asks whether that man had not already died, but the protagonist simply orders He Xiao to take the trash off the planet. He Xiao grabs the young man by the head. However, the young man tries to say that the two of them are on the same side, but it is already too late. After he is defeated, the demonic energy begins to dissipate, causing the young man's body to disappear completely. Lin Feng collapses to the ground in exhaustion because he can no longer move, and with no strength left, he simply lies there. He Xiao looks at his master, returns to being an undead, and simply disappears. Meanwhile, somewhere else, several troops are traveling along the road with a carriage carrying several people. They are simply enjoying the journey when a strange power catches their attention, leaving everyone surprised. As soon as they all get out to investigate where that impressive power is coming from, they arrive at the protagonist's farm and look around in amazement at such pure nature magic. They even find it difficult to believe that someone so powerful is hiding in a place like that because if they possessed nature magic that pure, they would accept the position of head of the nature department immediately. Another person notices that apparently a battle against a demon took place right there. As they approach, they see the protagonist sleeping on the ground. The man notices the nature lantern beside him and quickly understands that this was a side effect of pushing the nature lantern too hard. He tries to heal the protagonist, but meanwhile, Lin Feng is inside a different subspace. He looks ahead and wonders whether this is inside his own body because it feels extremely warm and gentle, and it is probably his own power. He looks behind him and sees that all of that is probably his necromancer power, but when he tries to condense it, he is attacked by his own energy. He regains his balance and asks what is happening and why the necromancer power is not completely under his control. That energy begins condensing on its own and transforms into He Xiao. The protagonist is surprised and asks whether he had not already died. He Xiao says that he did, but thanks to the protagonist, he finally understood the true meaning of death. He grabs the protagonist with one hand. Lin Feng tries to break free, but he cannot even move. He Xiao explains that once he manages to eliminate the protagonist's spirit, he will take over his body and in that way be reborn. However, at that exact moment, something interferes with their battle and the nature energy launches a powerful attack into his back. He Xiao throws the protagonist to the ground and Lin Feng is absorbed by the nature energy, creating a division between the two forces inside his own body. In the end, however, everything begins merging together once again. When he finally opens his eyes, he thinks that this time it was far too close and he almost died. Since his necromancer power had run out earlier, He Xiao did not have enough strength to continue, but he had hidden himself inside Lin Feng's undead magic and is definitely a hidden danger. Lin Feng looks ahead and sees several people talking. One of them says that he has already examined everything and that it was probably only magical exhaustion and a slight internal shock, but nothing serious. They notice that the protagonist has awakened. Another person arrives and gives a report saying that he thoroughly inspected the surrounding area and that it was definitely a high-level demonic aura, at least level 20 or above. They gather around the protagonist and ask how he is feeling because the operation was a success. Another helps him stand and asks whether he was the one who managed to defeat that demon. Lin Feng feels somewhat confused because he does not know who those people are, so perhaps it is better to say as little as possible. The bearded man tries to calm the protagonist down and tells him not to be so nervous. However, he thinks that the boy's nature magic is far too pure, something he has never seen before, and perhaps he is the child of nature that Vila mentioned. Judging by his clothes and badge, he belongs to Sunwheel Academy. The man introduces himself, saying that they are instructors from the nature department of the Extraordinary Academy. After they introduce themselves, Lin Feng relaxes a little and introduces himself as well, giving his name and academy, and saying that it is a pleasure to meet his instructors. Another group appears and a man asks Master Seymour what happened there. Seymour explains that there was a demonic invasion, but fortunately that Sunwheel student dealt with it. The man is impressed and walks over to the protagonist, saying that apparently great heroes truly do emerge in their youth. However, the red-haired man notices a broken sword on the ground and thinks that whatever was killed was that thing. Seymour asks Lord Count whether there is a problem and whether he discovered anything. Lord Count says that it is nothing because he was only thinking about how they go to the front lines and risk their lives to contain the demons, yet even so they still managed to find a way to reach that place, which is absurd. Seymour thinks that now that everything has been resolved, they can return to the academy. He asks Arlen to bring the protagonist along as well because they need the director to give them a very good explanation. A short while later, when they are already with the director, he says that he knows about everything and that from now on, The Academy will reinforce security in that area, promising to deploy 3 additional patrol squads and find a way to handle the situation. Seymour is not satisfied at all and tells the director that now that the water is up to his neck, he is finally panicking, because he is probably the kind of person who only looks for a bathroom after already soiling his pants. The director points out that the protagonist is still there, so he would appreciate it if Seymour could at least maintain a little dignity. Seymour continues scolding the director because he loves that wolf-like culture and leaves the students to fend for themselves like savages. Thank God one student managed to eliminate a demon, and that is great, but everything could have gone terribly wrong. If the director thinks he can solve the problem with a single sentence, that is not going to happen. The director understands exactly what is happening and tells the protagonist that he managed to eliminate a demon by himself and prevented it from causing further destruction. So his merits are remarkable, and his reward will be presented in the name of the Academy, a heroic soul fragment. Lin Feng asks what it does. The director explains that a heroic soul fragment is what remains of the will of an ancient hero. He remembers that the protagonist already obtained one fragment from a dungeon, and when 2 fragments from the same origin approach each other, they attract and merge, awakening the projection of a heroic spirit that fights by his side. However, the most important thing is that this heroic projection has no usage limit. Lin Feng thinks that is excellent, because the next time his magic runs out, he will still have enough strength to continue fighting. As soon as he brings the 2 soul fragments together, a man appears out of nowhere and kneels before the protagonist, saying that he is General Guan Yu. As soon as the director sees that man, he becomes somewhat concerned and tries to figure out who he is. But after searching through the book, he realizes that Guan Yu is not recorded in history. Lin Feng tells his summon to leave, and thanks the 2 men for everything they have done. Seymour tells Guo Ding that they need to take the protagonist with them. The purity of his nature magic is unlike anything Seymour has ever seen in his life, and with a little training, he will become someone extremely important in the future. However, the director asks them to let the protagonist choose for himself which path he wants to follow. Lin Feng is thinking that he is still far too weak against a truly powerful enemy. He does not have enough resources and cannot endure a prolonged battle. Therefore, he needs to become stronger as soon as possible. Otherwise, he will not even be able to take care of his farm in peace. From what he remembers, the mission hall still has many rewards, most of which are skill scrolls. Mission rewards are divided into 4 levels: A, B, C, and D. At the moment, for him, the rewards from C and D level missions are far too low. He looks at the first mission, which is to eliminate a pack of demonic wolves in Eagle Gorge, with a B+ threat level, requiring an average group of 5 people with an average level above 15. The next mission is to explore the ruins of the ancient mace tower up to the 30th floor, with an A- threat level. The requirements are at least 1 veteran rune master and a group of more than 4 people. The final mission is to escort supplies to the Eastern Front in Iron Rock City with a B-level threat rating. The reward is a general B-level skill scroll and 100 military merit points. The requirements are a group of at least 2 people with wilderness survival experience and fire-type combat abilities. He decides to accept that mission because, if he remembers correctly, it is an important forward military outpost. Not to mention that rumors say that because the troops remain there for long periods, they developed a unique military cultivation method. It allows them to efficiently grow grain and medicinal herbs in infertile land and harsh climates. If he can learn that method, he will be able to expand his farm considerably. However, the requirement for 2 people is somewhat annoying because he does not know where he will find someone with fire abilities. While he is thinking about that, 2 girls are arguing. One girl tells Ailing that all of this is her fault, but Ailing argues back, saying that if they made fake potions for her, of course she would retaliate. However, the other girl says that even so, Ailing beat up one of their members. Therefore, unless she compensates them with 1 or 2 gold-level items, she will not be allowed to leave. The other people watching realize that it is the same group again, as this is already the 3rd time that month. They wonder how newcomers keep falling for it because those people specialize in scamming new students with fake potions, and she will probably have to pay a fortune this time. Ailing orders the group to return her magical bear gallbladder immediately, but the other girl points out that she already drank the strengthening potion, and once it has been consumed, there is no way to undo it. Ailing prepares to fight. The other girl notices that she is itching for a fight and tells everyone to look at the scene because someone prefers violence instead of talking things through. The protagonist watches everything and is not pleased at all. The girl continues saying that Ailing asked her to prepare a strengthening potion, but after drinking it, She refuses to admit it and insists that she was robbed. The protagonist appears and says that this is exactly what happened, but the girl asks who he is. When she notices his clothing, she sees that he is a student from Sunwheel Academy and tells him to stay out of it. Lin Feng uses his abilities, and the girl becomes frightened, but then realizes that she has not suffered any damage. However, she was never the true target. The other people say that this group is always targeting newcomers and that it is disgusting. The other girl warns Ailing that this time, a senior from Sunwheel Academy is there to defend her, but she will not be so lucky next time. Lin Feng orders them to hand over the magical bear gallbladder immediately, or they will lose the gallbladders inside their own bodies. The group eventually hands it over, and the protagonist asks whether it is the same one he gave her last time. Ailing says yes, because she had been waiting for an opportunity to return it to him. However, after losing the last time, she became somewhat envious and thought about turning it into a potion so that she could become a little stronger. Lin Feng tosses the item back to her and emphasizes one final time that if he gave it to her, then it belongs solely to her because it is useless to him. Ailing thanks him for helping her. Lin Feng says that she does not need to thank him with words, but if she truly wants to show her gratitude, she can help him find someone with fire-type abilities. She confirms that she can, and the protagonist becomes excited because now things are finally starting to work out. A short while later, he accepts his mission, and now that everything is ready, the cultivation methods and skill scrolls will all be his. Late at night, inside a secret room in Count Iron Lion's mansion, he is not pleased at all with everything that has happened because his two nephews, Haru and Tuka, are dead. The Academy's security completely suppressed the news and they still have not found the killer. Shadow asks what any of that has to do with her and whether that is why he summoned her there. The Count points out that Shadow made a promise. Their agreement was that as long as the Count provided information about the defenses of the front line and covered up the infiltration of that thing, he would receive support in securing his position. But now he lost a battle, and that stupid old man demoted him from Duke to Count. His military command was reduced, and his lands were cut in half. Now he cannot even protect his own two nephews. So where is all the support that was promised to him? Shadow explains that the battlefield situation changes constantly, and they suffered losses as well. As for the deaths of his two nephews, that was due to their own incompetence because if they had followed the plan and sacrificed Haru and Tuka together, things would never have reached this point. The Count asks whether Shadow really thinks he did not want to do that. But before he can continue speaking, Shadow interrupts him and warns that Lady Guladosa only cares about results. The Count points out that ever since he opened a gap to allow them to infiltrate, that old man has been watching him closely. So what else do they expect him to do? Shadow thinks that is merely the Count's problem, and he should not forget it. Those nature-type people will not save him, and trying to use the power of nature to remove the curse inside him will only make him die faster. In addition, they have already prepared everything in Iron Rock City. Therefore, when the time comes, the Count must make sure to lure the garrison away. As soon as Shadow disappears, the Count realizes that he has simply become a pawn and does not have many choices. Meanwhile, on the mountain road leading to Iron Rock City, the two are walking calmly. Ailing notices a monster approaching and quickly attacks it, managing to finish it off with a single strike. However, she thinks that something is wrong because that is already the third monster to appear within that hour alone. Lin Feng asks why she thinks that. Ailing explains that the city is an important military fortress. The army carries out patrols and clearing operations everywhere. Under normal circumstances, in an area so close to the main road, they would barely see any demonized wolves, and large beasts would also be extremely rare. But now, ever since they entered that mountainous region earlier, they have already been ambushed 3 times. So it is obvious that something must be wrong. The protagonist uses his nature power and points out that the nearby plants do not sense anything unusual. Either way, they need to move a little faster and try to reach the outskirts of the city before nightfall. As soon as they arrive at the city, the protagonist is impressed when he sees the suspended terraces. No matter what happens, he needs to find a way to learn those people's planting methods. Ailing asks him to calm down a little because the place is far too quiet. Since it is a military fortress, they should prepare for combat and advance carefully. A short while later, they find someone, and as soon as the protagonist approaches, he realizes that the person is already dead. When they look a little farther ahead and see several other people lying on the ground, they cannot believe how something like this is possible because there are 3,000 soldiers stationed there, not to mention the defensive formation, so this should not be happening. Ailing hears a noise and when she looks ahead, notices several demons there, apparently setting up some kind of ritual formation. They cannot allow it to be completed. Ailing offers to draw the demons' attention and lure them away. Meanwhile, the protagonist needs to get close and destroy the altar. Lin Feng warns that all of them are level 35 demons, so how is she supposed to lure them away? Suddenly, a sneak attack comes from behind, but the protagonist notices it in time and pulls Ailing out of the way. However, that is enough to alert all the demons. They continue attacking, and the protagonist tries to protect his companion, telling her to be careful. Even so, the attacks continue, and the two of them end up under enormous pressure. Ailing holds something in her hand and asks what it is. The protagonist also tries to use his magic and realizes that he cannot use anything in that area. That formation is probably creating some kind of magical blockade, and he cannot even summon the heroic spirit, which is extremely bad. One of the skeletons asks whether the two of them like his anti-magic formation, because only demonic energy works inside that zone. Lin Feng knows that technically his undead magic does not belong to a normal magic system, but with his companion there, if he uses it, he will expose himself. Therefore, what they should do is simply run. Ailing offers to stay behind and hold off the demons, and tells the protagonist to run as fast as possible to ask for help at Longwind Fortress to the east. Lin Feng asks why she's going to do that. She simply explains that someone needs to make it back and warn them. And since she lost to him in their last fight, she cannot allow him to keep looking down on her forever. Therefore, he needs to go. But just as she prepares to fight, the protagonist knocks her unconscious with a single blow. The demons ask whether he is planning to betray his companion in exchange for his own life because that is typical of disgusting humans. Lin Feng explains that now he no longer has to worry about hiding his powers, so it is time for them to start playing for real. One of the demons asks what he's talking about because he's about to die. He takes out the nature lamp, and one of the demons thinks that he truly wants to die by trying something like that. But as the demon's attacks come toward him, he creates a shield around himself and channels his necromancer magic into the nature lamp. With that, he manages to summon Savis, the Reaper. The demons try to attack, but none of their attacks have any effect on her. They realize that she is an undead. The protagonist laughs because the hunt begins now. The demons try to surround the Reaper, but she finishes all of them off with a single movement. Meanwhile, a little farther away, one of the demons realizes that there really is a summoner, capable of ignoring the anti-magic zone. Another demon points out that the summoner himself is not that strong, so if his companions can keep those undead occupied, he will personally deal with the summoner. With that plan in mind, the demons advance, and a battle between the two groups begins. However, one of the demons is extremely confident, because summoners can indeed be very troublesome. But as soon as the summoner dies, their summons disappear as well. He charges directly at the protagonist and tells him to simply accept death. Lin Feng prepares to counterattack, leaving the demons somewhat surprised. Their attacks collide, and the protagonist shouts that his punch carries 20 years of accumulated power, so he would like to see whether the demon can really block it. The demon is sent flying while the others are also losing their battle against his small army. The same demon gets back up, and the protagonist asks who he is, why they are attacking that city, and what their true objective is. However, the demon refuses to say anything because an insect like a human has no right to interrogate him. As soon as the great Guladosa descends, all of them will become fuel for her power. The protagonist thinks that this name is appearing again and asks the Reaper to take action, but she does not quite understand what he wants. Lin Feng reminds her that she said she was good at investigating, and if she does not cooperate, he will hand her over to that demon. He emphasizes that he needs their complete plans, the location of their allies, and every detail she can obtain because all of it will be important. Savis activates her powers and takes one of the demons into a completely strange dimension. The protagonist takes advantage of the fact that his companion is still unconscious and walks over to the altar platform. He realizes that the nature magic in the surrounding area is almost completely blocked, but it is not only nature magic. Apparently, this is the anti-magic zone they were talking about. He tries to touch it but realizes that he cannot get close using physical strength alone. If that is the case, then he needs to use something else. He summons one of his shadows and orders it to smash the structure immediately. As soon as the core is destroyed, the barrier begins to collapse. He realizes that there are no signs of life anywhere. But for now, the most important thing is to go back and see how his companion is doing. She is still unconscious, and the protagonist realizes that aside from a few minor internal injuries and the superficial wounds from earlier, she is basically fine. Savis is feeling wronged. The protagonist calls her over and takes one of her books. As soon as he opens it, a symbol appears and activates on its own. After the energy throughout the area stabilizes, the book activates by itself, and the direction it points toward is the demonic battlefield. The protagonist leaves his companion behind and quickly heads in that direction. As soon as he arrives, the entire place is basically destroyed, and several stones with symbols are floating in the air. The protagonist puts on a cloak and shouts, asking whether anyone is still nearby. A mother and child are running as fast as they can from one of the demons, but Her daughter ends up falling. The mother blocks the monster's first attack and tells Nanan to run as fast as she can. The monster easily finishes off the woman and the girl begins crying desperately. But at that moment, the protagonist arrives and stops the attack, ordering one of his shadows to finish off the monster. Lin Feng asks the girl if she is alright, but Nanan shouts that there are still many people nearby and begs the protagonist to save them. Lin Feng tells her to stay calm and promises that he will save everyone. In the central square of the village, one of the demons is ordering the humans to hand something over immediately. If they do, they will have a chance to serve his lord. One of the soldiers is still alive, struggling against death itself. At that moment, another demon appears and tells the commander that something terrible has happened. A man in a black robe invaded the area with a horde of undead. However, the commander says that it is merely a necromancer and that his servant is already terrified, which is disgraceful. To show his confidence, the commander tells his subordinates to keep an eye on the survivors because he will personally deal with that necromancer. But before he can even advance, the protagonist's servants have already reached him, leaving him surprised. Even so, the commander shows courage and charges forward, only to be knocked down with a single punch. The other lower-level demons become frightened and start running away in fear. Lin Feng is relieved to see that the others decided to flee because he is already almost out of magic. Everyone kneels in front of the protagonist and the two heroes ask whether he is a necromancer. Lin Feng knows very well that if he says yes, he may frighten everyone even more. Therefore, he asks whether they would believe him if he said he was not and changes the subject, asking what exactly happened there. However, one of the heroes warns that the Empire has already declared every necromancer a wanted criminal. The protagonist points out that he just saved everyone's lives there, and if he truly were a criminal, he would have helped the demons eliminate them all. He notices that only a few survivors remain. One of the warriors, even against his better judgment, realizes that there is no other choice but to trust the protagonist. He lowers his sword and asks the unknown warrior to follow him. He leads the protagonist to an object and says that all those demons appeared out of nowhere, and their objective was that thing. Lin Feng asks the warrior to explain exactly what it is. The warrior says that it is a demon-slaying artifact specially forged by the strategist of the Nation Legion. He continues explaining, but as soon as he opens the container, he realizes that something is wrong and asks how it disappeared. The protagonist takes a look and realizes that there is no illusion magic, which means that it really was taken away. Suddenly, the battlefield is struck by a strange energy that begins draining the life force from the bodies of the fallen. The soldiers start to panic, asking what is happening. The entire area is hit by an overwhelming pressure, and that energy grows denser and denser, knocking down even the warriors who were still standing. The protagonist realizes that the pressure is terrifying and not even the undead can withstand it. One of the survivors says that he has seen that summoning ritual on the battlefield before. Guladosa is descending. Guladosa realizes that one piece is still missing, so the power is incomplete, but even so, it is enough to send his power down. As soon as he regains consciousness, he looks to the side, sees the protagonist, and is surprised that, out of everyone, he happens to be there. The magic continues expanding, and Guladosa finally manages to control his body perfectly. He admits that it has truly been a long time, but he has finally managed to find those damned insects. He asks how any of them dare appear before him. The protagonist senses the aura and recognizes that it is exactly the same person he defeated in the room. Guladosa warns that last time the protagonist got lucky and managed to escape, but this time he will use his most precious technique and crush him completely. Something appears and begins transforming, creating a barrier that traps the two of them inside. One of the warriors asks whether that is the Curtain of Fate, which means that man is a demon king, but they have no idea how he appeared inside the city. That is Guladosa's strongest ability, Duel of Fate, but they do not know who he is targeting, and apparently it is only a young man. The warrior becomes worried because that boy does not even look older than his own son. It makes no sense. That monster's power of fate takes a very long time to accumulate, and every time he uses it, he has to wait a long time before he can use it again. So why would he waste it on a young man? The protagonist, somewhat lost in the situation, asks where he is because, until just now, he was standing in the square. The system announces that the Duel of Fate has begun, and that during the challenge, all abilities of both parties will be restricted. The challenger is Guladosa, and the challenged party is Lin Feng. The Demon King says that now the protagonist can begin trembling because this is his most precious ability and power, the Wheel of Fate Deprivation. The wheel will randomly select one skill as the theme of the duel, and the winner will take all of the loser's fate. Lin Feng, still confused, asks what this fate he keeps talking about actually is. But the Demon King tells the protagonist not to worry because, no matter what the theme is, he will still be completely crushed. The wheel begins spinning and, when it finally stops, the theme is decided. The planting skill has been selected. Guladosa starts laughing at the chosen skill because he thought it would be something serious. Although he's not good at planting, with the superior physique of the demon race, handling such lowly manual labor will be extremely easy for him. On top of that, the protagonist is probably a necromancer summoner who has never even touched a hoe in his entire life. Lin Feng begins trembling, and the Demon King asks whether he's already that frightened, but the protagonist says it is quite the opposite because he is about to burst out laughing. The ability begins generating the planting space, and a batch of seeds is given to both of them. The Demon King thinks that it is extremely simple. They only need to plant the seeds and wait for them to grow. Such an easy task could be done with his eyes closed. It has been a long time since the protagonist felt this excited, because someone actually decided to compete against him, in agriculture of all things. However, before starting, he notices that the Demon King is using his power to open holes for planting. Just by watching, the protagonist already knows that the monster has lost. 2 hours later, the Demon King's field looks reasonably good. He's impressed to discover that he also has talent for planting. But when he looks at the protagonist, he realizes that even while using nothing more than an ordinary human body, Lin Feng managed to match his planting speed. However, the Demon King does not think that is anything special, because apparently that is the only thing the protagonist can do. Lin Feng simply ignores him and continues focusing on his own work. The Demon King's ability announces that planting has been completed and that the evaluation will now begin based on plant vitality, life force, and growth potential. The two wait for a few seconds, and shortly afterward they are surprised. Something appears beside the protagonist and his plants begin to grow. The ability then completes its evaluation and declares Lin Feng the winner. The Demon King refuses to accept it, saying that it is impossible because there was clearly no difference between the two fields. Lin Feng starts laughing and explains that farming is not simply about shoving seeds into the ground. He infused the seeds with nature magic so that they could absorb more nutrients from the soil. On the other hand, the Demon King's demonic energy only caused his seeds to wither, and that is what gave Lin Feng the victory. Guladosa thinks that this is cheating and refuses to accept it, so he decides to crush the protagonist with his own hands. Lin Feng asks whether he really flips the table whenever he loses. What kind of Demon King has no honor like him? But before the Demon King can do anything, Guladosa's own shadow appears in front of the protagonist to protect him. The ability announces that the challenge has ended. The challenger's fate has been removed, and in addition, prohibited behavior has been detected, resulting in forced resolution. Guladosa begins losing all of his strength, and his body quickly becomes completely immobile. All of his energy starts flowing into the protagonist's body, and a mark appears on Lin Feng's hand. Meanwhile, in the palace of the 7th Demon King, Guladosa cannot believe what happened. Suddenly, the 6th Demon Queen, Elisha, and the 5th Demon King, Lord of the Mountain Wind, appear directly in front of him. The queen asks how he managed to lose to a human. The Lord of the Mountain Wind points out that Guladosa has humiliated the entire demon realm. The 7th Demon King lost to some nameless human, and that is a massive joke. Guladosa does not like the way he is being treated at all, but the queen says that now he will receive his punishment for disgracing the demon race. She puts a jester outfit on him and says that the Lord asked her to make Guladosa reflect on everything that happened and on himself. Guladosa falls to his knees, realizing that he has failed that Lord. However, after the other two leave him alone, the queen thinks that it has been a very long time since she encountered a human as interesting as that one. At the same time, back in the square, the protagonist finally manages to return, but the mark on his hand refuses to disappear no matter what he does. At that exact moment, a magical cube appears, and the protagonist's book opens once again. The energy of the cube and the book begins to merge. One of the warriors realizes that it is the city treasure. Lin Feng is still completely lost and asks how the thing is supposed to be used. One of the warriors says that they also have absolutely no idea how it works. When the strategist sent the object, he said that it was a divine weapon, created specifically to fight demons. But before he could explain and teach them how to use it, the demons attacked. Lin Feng stares at the cube and tries infusing his magic into it, but realizes that it is not working. He decides to keep it and says that he will hold on to it for the time being. Once he figures out how it works, he will return it. The warrior simply agrees because the protagonist saved the entire city, so the object should count as a war trophy anyway. However, his greatest concern is that the mission location has now disappeared, so how is he supposed to turn in his mission? He looks at the warrior and says that he has one final question. Earlier, he had saved 2 students in the city, but the entire city has now been destroyed. So how are they supposed to resolve the mission? The warrior is surprised by the question but explains that the solution is actually fairly simple. They only need to go to the Empire's Iron Wall because the military office there handles this type of situation. And as long as they have proof, the mission will count as completed and the reward will still be given. The protagonist simply walks away, and the warrior asks whether their benefactor will at least tell them his name. Lin Feng merely says goodbye because, if fate allows it, they will meet again someday. Back in the city, he goes to his companion and tells her that it is time to wake up. As soon as she wakes, she asks why she passed out and what happened to the demons. The protagonist explains that he does not know exactly what happened because she suddenly fainted, but the demons fought with him for a while, and then, shortly afterward, began running away on their own. Ailing thinks that the explanation sounds a little strange because she clearly remembers the protagonist approaching her from behind before she lost consciousness. However, he changes the subject and tells her to get up so they can turn in the mission at the Empire's Iron Wall. A short while later, they arrive at the wall, and she's impressed to see all the soldiers guarding the place and resisting the demons day and night. They head to the military affairs office at the Iron Wall camp. As soon as they enter one of the cabins, the bearded man looks at them and asks whether they are academy students who came to turn in a mission. When he sees that the mission was for Iron Rock City, he becomes somewhat surprised because the city had been completely destroyed. He asks whether they encountered the Demon King's army. The two remain silent for a moment, but the protagonist says yes. However, he does not know exactly what happened at the time because they simply started fleeing. The old man admits that they were extremely lucky for something like that to happen, but since none of it was their fault, the reward will be issued according to the Academy's rules. Once they are outside, at the base of the wall, Ailing asks whether he does not want to climb up and take a look because she would really like to see those heroes up close. However, the protagonist is not satisfied with any of this because what they received was only the military reward, while the Academy reward has still not been delivered. Therefore, it would be better for them to return to the Academy first and settle everything. But at that exact moment, a tremendous noise echoes everywhere and the armies begin moving. One of the commanders announces that the demons are attacking the wall and that they need to evacuate the area immediately. Lin Feng grabs his companion's hand and says that they also need to retreat immediately. As he moves away, he realizes that it has appeared again. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.